Good afternoon for a change instead of good evening, and welcome to Speakers Corner UK here on the Sunday, the 6th of June. Stops and I had some time, and we thought we haven't done a review for a while, and we had a part of a live stream from Pinecreek, who's an atheist, who has people come on, who's become more visible to Muslims because he appeared on one of the Muslim streams. I think it was Hamza's Den, if I remember correctly. And so he does live streams and invites people on. And this is an interaction that lasts about an hour, maybe a bit less, where a Muslim comes on that we're familiar with, a guy that goes by the sort of avatar of Maverick, and they discuss some things on Islam. And what we'll get from this is, even though Pinecreek doesn't know that much about Islam, he's still able to ask some really good questions, to ask generalist questions around things and put forward ideas that I think you'll find interesting. We'll review that. We'll maybe give a few extra thoughts because obviously we have a little bit of knowledge on Islam. And so let's see how we get on with this sort of review. And obviously, before we go any further, let me introduce, as always, my co-host, Stops. How are you, sir?
Hello. Well. And I think his name is Ahmed. I think I remember now.
Yes, I think you're right. I think it's Ahmed.
Oh, and look, we have a full chat already. Look at all the wonderful people accompanying us, curious what we're going to be talking about. Welcome.
All righty. Yes, a warm welcome to you if you're a live viewer. And, of course, if you're watching this afterwards. Let's get straight on into it. So here we go. Let me bring
another thing I want to add quickly because I'm going to forget. Because what Pinecreek did, he said, well, let me pay EF Dawa or what is it, whatever channel they're using, a visit just to say hi and see how they're doing. And he did that, and they never returned the favor. They never came back and said, let us go and say hi to Pinecreek on his channel. Never did this.
No, and he did say that he'd welcome them to come to his channel, but he won't go back there until they've come to visit him. He's been away to visit them. It's now their chance to come visit him, and I don't think they've done that. So we'll see, obviously, and we'll see through this video that maybe it's probably a good job they don't.
Oh, great. Right. We have a goddess amongst us. Wow.
Indeed. There we go. Shout out to everybody who's watching. All right, let's get started. So this Muslim fellow has just joined the live stream. There's been other guests on, and this is the beginning of this segment.
Just a second. I got to say thank you, Brother John, for the super chat. What about animals used in scientific experiments? Most certainly mistreated and for good reason. Medical advancements. Why do I have that? Medical advancements have a drink on me. Great question, Brother John. Excellent question.
All right.
So you wanted to defend Islam or something I saw in the live stream chat?
Well, there was one particular thing that I wanted to address, and that was the so-called moon splitting.
Oh, okay.
Right. The moon splitting is something that happens in the end of times. It's an end time prophecy. It's not something that has happened before, or
Well, I think we'd agree that that's probably, or at least that's one interpretation you can have, and of course it'll be great for Maverick to actually debate that Sheikh Farouk fellow who thinks that it's happened, thinks that he's got eyewitness testimony as far away as India. It'll be interesting for these two Muslims to discuss this matter and see whether they can come to any agreement on this. But that seems likely that it's kind of at least one interpretation that I think is more likely, to me at least, that it's an end times prophecy type thing. What's your thought on that, Stops?
I'm looking at the moment. I'm looking for the real sentence to make an informed decision. And okay. Of course, now that I'm looking for it, I can't find it immediately.
It's all right. We can always come back to it.
So this is what I would like to do first, to take a look at this and see, because there are so many different things. And this Farouk guy, okay, I don't know that he knows so much about Islam either. Because the thing is, people take little bits and pieces, all right? They look for things and then they say, well, I'm the expert. And then they have 15 or 20 or 50 sentences and they call themselves an expert. And you and I, we just say, look, we read the Quran and that's basically all there is to it. So I don't consider myself an expert. But I do know that nothing in the Quran can be left uninterpreted. And I found the sentence and it says, the hour is nigh. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. And the moon is cleft asunder. But if they see a sign, they turn away and say this is but transient magic. So there is no indication here that we are talking about the future. There is no indication here that this is in any way related to the end times or something. And I've just seen that it's in 54, 1 and 2. So if anybody wants to check on this, I'm quickly going to enter this to look at the corpus. 54.
I mean, it's not
point-
such a big thing that we need to go into as much. I think this was a side point, really. I don't know why he kind of wanted to go into this, but there we go.
I think this is important for future, because now in the corpus, it's the perfect third person. In other words, it has come near. It's in the past, because this is something that he will be adamant that this is not the case, that this will be in the future. No, it's in the past. Has come near. Has split the moon. In other words, this is something that has happened in the past. And this is where Farouk this time is correct, because it uses the past tense. There is no indication this is going to be in the future and with the end times. But a lot of commentaries do say that this relates to the end times. And it says here, like Yusuf Ali, the hour of judgment is nigh. Okay, so this is a contentious issue. So if you look at the Quran itself, undecided. That's it.
Yeah, because you could take it that the hour is nigh is like still in the future. But although, again, what does nigh mean? If nigh means close, then what does close mean? If
No.
Is there any indication of what close is supposed to mean?
The hour is nigh is an interpretation.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't say that.
All right, let's go on.
So the Quran is definitely in the past tense. It has happened. The hour has happened.
Huh.
It's something that happens end of time.
Doesn't it say in the Quran in the past tense?
He's
No.
right. Yeah.
The Quran, when God speaks about anything, he speaks in the present tense. Because time
This
doesn't
is
pass.
bullshit. You see, this is Maverick. This is he's plain lying. All right, he knows it's wrong, and yet he will, with a tone of certainty, say, no. If God says anything, it's always in the present. It's not. It's perfect. It's past. So don't talk bullshit here. I don't understand why he's doing that. It's very easy for anyone to open the Quran and read it, and we'll see. No, it's in the past. So this is why I was adamant to go and do this, to make sure that he's lying. All right. That's
What's
how
the
easy
verse,
it is.
Stops? What's the verse?
54:1.
Has come near the hour and has split the moon. The hour has come near and the moon has split. The hour of judgment, Yusuf Ali, is nigh and the moon is cleft asunder. Do you know what? I don't know. I'm undecided on that, because if it is judgment, I mean, we can look at tafsirs and so forth. Then all they can say, which I think is a crap argument anyway, is that it's still to come. Because what does near actually mean? You know, has come near the hour and has split the moon. That's what the corpus says. Well, when is near? Is the next
But look at
5 billion
but you need
years?
to look at the context. The context here is that Muhammad was challenged by the Meccans: if you are indeed a prophet of your God, then demonstrate it to us. And he said, okay, I will do so. And then it was demonstrated to them in the way that Allah split the moon for Muhammad. This is why this Indian king says it happened, and it happened in the 7th century. And this is why they are contradicting each other now. If they are saying, well, there's evidence from this Indian king that he sort of testified to this, then it was in the 7th century. And if you look at the context of the Meccans challenging Muslim, it also happened in the lifetime of Muhammad, i.e. 7th century. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm just looking at the tafsirs. Even there's different opinions on this, right? The narration
Right.
of Ibn Abbas said that his interpretation is Allah, the hour draws near. He says the coming of the hour drew nigh by the advent of Muhammad, and the coming down of the shmok, and the moon was rent in twain, obviously split in two. And this is another sign of the closeness of the day of judgment. That's Ibn Abbas. And then Al-Jalalain says the hour has drawn near, resurrection is close at hand. The moon has split, it broke in two at Mount Abu Qabais.
Yeah, but he says as a sign for the prophet.
Yeah, I think the best we could say here probably is, at best, it seems to lean in that direction, that it's already happened. But I mean, I wouldn't hang my hat on it, because somebody like Maverick will take the other interpretation or whatever and just run with that.
And if you look at Maududi, he goes down the middle, and he says that the hour of resurrection of which you are being foretold has drawn near at hand. Remember, this is an end time sect. or end times cult. I don't know. I never know which one to use. They believe. I mean, Muhammad says in the Hadith that look at the boy next to you. He will not be an old man, excuse me, before the last hour will have happened. So they thought it's imminent. And this is what he says, he has drawn near at hand. So if you go down the middle, the way that Maududi says it, then it makes sense, because then the hour is close, and then it is present. In other words, this is during Muhammad's lifetime, who thought that it's going to come up soon. Then this is just another indication that the splitting of the moon is another sign of the end times happening soon, and that's it.
Yeah, I can see how one can lean that way. Yeah.
So I'm actually going with Maududi on this one.
He talks about Moses. That's in the past tense.
That's when he's narrating about Moses.
Yeah, wasn't he narrating about the moon splitting?
Yeah, but he's not going to speak about it. But if you read the context makes it obvious that it's speaking about the end times. However, when he speaks in certain passages, then he's basically most of the time it's as though he's speaking always in the present times.
Ah, okay.
Because time doesn't apply to him. But the context makes it clear that
is this it? The hour of judgment is nigh, and the moon is cleft asunder. But if they see a sign, they turn away. But
the hour of judgment is nigh. That alone makes it evident.
Now, some Muslims do believe.
Yeah, I can see how he cherry picks a part of it to suit his narrative, right? And doesn't he bring up any of the tafsirs? Now, if Pinecreek had brought up the tafsirs, you would have seen certain ones that said it's happened already, etc., right? So at the very, very best, all he's got is that this is debatable. But I think you can lean towards it already having happened, and people like Farouk and others think that it has. So I'd be interested in him debating Farouk, and we listen, right? I don't mind. I've got no dog in this fight, one way or the other. Can one of them provide a better argument than the other to suggest that either it's happened and we've had eyewitness testimony, or it's still to come and it's a sign of judgment whenever this is supposed to happen, which is, again, completely unclear.
And Maverick still pops in. He still trolls us. So it's not a case of he was there and now he doesn't come anymore. No. He still pops in now and again. Sleeper has a work, and it means he rejects the worst take on the text in a moral sense. Yeah, okay. I'm just going through the Maverick is doing gymnastics now.
Yeah.
I'm just going through the chat, so it's quite funny. Maverick goes from all present tense to most of the time, consistent for a couple of minutes. It's true.
Yeah.
Okay.
That it's a past tense miracle, right?
I'm not really. I'm not addressing what people believe. I'm addressing what it says in the Quran.
Right,
The
but
Quran itself makes it evident.
Okay, so let's just stop for a moment on this point, right? I've been listening in on Discord as it happens today. I was doing other things for 2 hours on this exact point, where there was a very smart, seemingly perhaps ex-Muslim, maybe, but certainly somebody that was well-versed in the Quran, could speak Arabic, versus a Shia Muslim. And they went on for 2 hours about interpretations. And this Shia Muslim would not accept that the majority opinion, whether it was Shia or not, was what he ought to go with. His view, as an aside, is that the 7 heavens means that there's 7 atmospheric layers of the earth. So we're in the lowest heaven now. When it was pointed out that you don't really get stars or shooting stars or whatever in the lowest heaven, he went on to try and justify this. And Maverick and these guys are doing exactly the same thing. And this is one of the biggest problems, in my view, with this Quran, that it does not have one single clear interpretation. Now, there's only, seems to me, one of 2 options. There could be another one, but 2 main options. Either God cannot make it clear, or he doesn't want to. And whichever one that is, that's a huge problem for this God, who in that same book says it's a clear, concise message for all people for all time. If it was some sort of vague message for people in the 7th century, you could go, okay, we can disregard it. But people like Maverick and virtually all Muslims think exactly the opposite. This is a clear book. He just said it himself, right? If you read verse 1, it's obvious what the context is. No, it's not obvious, because you have tafsirs that disagree with each other. You have scholars who genuinely want to understand this book and cannot agree on these things. Oh, but then we'll shift the burden, then we'll shift the goalpost and say, well, there's some verses that are clear than some aren't. Or show us the clear ones and let's see if there's any disagreement anyway. But even if we granted there was no disagreement with some clear verses, the rest of them are in, dispute. So this idea that you're not taking somebody else, it's your opinion that you're not taking somebody else's opinion. I mean, this is just really silly.
Yeah. That's an excellent summary. Yeah.
That's speaking about the end times.
Yeah, the point I was making is there's probably some really sincere Muslims who will read the same verse I just read out and say that is past tense, but it was for a judgment as nigh for something that happened in the past.
I mean, subjectively, people can believe whatever they want, but at the end of the day, what matters is what can be objectively verified. So, fact of the matter is, the Quran itself, it's not in dispute that it's speaking about the end times.
And that is his subjective opinion. No, he will say, this is my objective opinion and it's a fact. We'll demonstrate it's a fact. In fact, we bring on that other fellow that was on Discord. He'll go through the hermeneutics with this guy for 2 hours. And at the end, you'll find that he won't be able to do this, but he'll still claim it, just like the Shia Muslim I heard recently. So, yeah, all he's saying is this is my interpretation that I really, really believe, and I'm going to take that. To the rest of us, he's just giving his subjective interpretation.
Okay. Even if you speak to the majority of Muslims, it's not something that is in dispute.
Oh, really? Where's your evidence of that? That's all we have to ask here. Where's your evidence that it's not in dispute, that this is a future thing and not something that's already happened? Where is your evidence of that? Now he might go and find and cherry pick a few scholars, and you can go and find just as many, if not more, that don't say so. This is the problem with Islam, or at least one of the biggest problems with Islam.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
Besides that, actually, I wanted to explore this idea that potentially the Quran is not, as the messenger claims, and from God himself. If that is not the case, then we would be claiming, if we go by what the Quran says itself, we would be claiming that Muhammad simply went against his community because his community made certain prohibitions in the name of God, such as certain prohibitions about what animals certain people can eat and what animals the elite can eat. Basically, some sort of discrimination between the peasants and the elite in regards to the
Didn't
animals.
Jesus go against his community of the Pharisees?
No, but first I want to address the Quran.
Okay,
The point is,
but the point I'm making is just because Muhammad might have gone against his own community, and therefore it's more likely to be true, if that's what you're saying.
no, that's not the point.
Okay, make your point.
That's not.
Okay, so this is something that Pinecreek will do quite a lot throughout this, which I think is great. Juxtapose it with Christianity and say, hang on a moment, if you're saying that and you're trying to make some substantial point, but hey, how do you answer the fact that the Christians, or Jesus in this case, has done the same thing? And if he can't answer that and go, how, but it's different in this way for these reasons, well, then the point is either invalid or it doesn't carry any force. So this is a great technique that people can use. If you don't know a book, just compare it with something else that you do know, like Pinecreek obviously is quite well versed in Christianity, and compare the two. When you're hearing something, let me just juxtapose with Christianity, and let's see if the Muslim has something more substantial to say than a Christian might say in the same circumstance. And if he hasn't, well, then his point doesn't carry any weight.
The point I'm making is, if the claim he's making is not true, then what we are saying is that he simply didn't like the meat prohibitions that the elite made, and he didn't like the fact that they claimed that God's angels were females, and just for those two reasons, he put himself in a position where he gets persecuted and he went to war twice.
Okay, so I'm sure Pinecreek will answer in a moment, but before he does, I don't remember exactly what he says. What's the evidence that that's the reasons? He puts these two as if these are the only two options. The only option we need is that he was mistaken, but he believed that he was correct. That's all we need, right? But he wants to make it sound as if there's all these considerations, these motivating factors against him doing this, and therefore the most plausible reason is that he was telling the truth. No, the most plausible reason is, in our view, the non-Muslim view, is that he believed what he thought. That's all we need. There could have been other considerations there. We don't have to go to liar, etc., but he genuinely believed it, and he was simply mistaken. But he believed it with such veracity, as other humans have done throughout history, that he was prepared to die for it. Because Pinecreek might bring up about the Christians, right? They really believed that Jesus was the Messiah, and they went out and they were prepared to die for it. So this isn't, again, a point, in his favor, but it's not just the only two options, right? Which is how he's trying to present this.
Ice and all of that, and there's nothing in the Quran that he benefits from. So it would be like saying he lied and he put himself in all kinds of trouble lying, but he didn't benefit from it.
Okay, now you understand the Christians have the same argument, right?
What is that argument?
Why would the disciples, the apostles, die for a lie? They had nothing to gain.
See, this is beautiful, right? And like I say, this is just textbook on how to critique somebody else if you don't know their book, but you're aware of another book, and you can juxtapose a similar criteria to him, right? You can't really see his face because it's very dark here, but now the brain is ticking, right? For me, this is one of Pinecreek's specialities. He gets people to think. They're so used to responding because they're asked, and we, Stops and I fall into this sometimes, of asking them questions for which they have almost like a scripted response that comes out of their mouth without thinking. And Pinecreek is able to get them to stop and think. And that, for me, is brilliant, right? This is one thing I could be way better at. The moment of pause here, which we're seeing here now, might be only for a second. For me, this is gold. I look at those pauses. When I see that, I'm going, he's thinking now. That's something that they most often don't do. And I love this, right?
See, it's one thing talking about Jesus. It's another thing talking about the apostles. I mean, who even knows?
But what would you say to that Christian who would make that argument?
What is his argument?
Well, Jesus Christ was God in flesh and rose from the dead. And if it wasn't true, then why would they go around saying these things? And they were willing to die for something they saw with their own eyes. If it was a lie, they wouldn't have died for it. But they did. So therefore, it's true. They had nothing to gain.
I'm not saying, just because I said that Muhammad put himself through a lot just for a lie, I'm not claiming that just for that reason alone, he's definitely not lying. So.
Okay, so now we see a subtle shifting of the goalposts, right? He gave those two criteria in the beginning, right? That they might not want to eat, or there were the two criteria, whatever he said there. I know it was something about the animals and people being treated. Why would he put himself through this? And now when it's juxtaposed on Christianity, now we have a shifting of the goalposts. We've got to be very careful of this. I'm just finally tuned to it today because, like I said, I was listening to somebody else who did this for about 2 hours. I was just listening in, and every time that something was brought up, he'd shift the goalpost very subtly. Just shift it on. Well, I'm not saying just that. Now, okay, so what's your strongest argument for this, right? And then you juxtapose, well, what about this thing? And he'll add extra criteria as you go, right? So that he never has to concede, well, okay, other people can do the same thing. So, and you can see it by the body movement, right? There's this uncomfortable movement of the body. I know it's very dark, so you might not see it. We're seeing it quite clearly, or at least I am on my monitor. So just notice what's going on here as he tries to now answer this when, the reductio, as in like a counterexample, has been presented to him.
Okay. Just because people have gone through some extraneous trouble for their particular claim does not mean that their claim is true.
Right.
That's not what I'm claiming it. But it's a point. At the end of the day, it's a point nonetheless.
It's
not something that I can dismiss.
Is it a point that you can dismiss or not dismiss?
No, it's not a point that I can dismiss. It's something that I have to take into account.
Okay. Did you dismiss it for the Christians?
No, not at all.
Okay. So you're
He just dismissed it for the Christians. Stops, you say something. Go on.
No, I was. Yeah.
He just dismissed it for the Christians. So either he's going to take it for both of them, in which case it's not a point of contention. We need to find something else, or he's going to dismiss it for both of them. But
He just said it's different. Yeah.
Well, in what way is it different? Right? There seems to be no substantial way in which they're different. Both people believed, what they were doing was correct, and they were prepared to be persecuted and or go through hardship, apparently, for their beliefs. What's the difference?
This is why.
Go on.
I'm saying this is why it's actually a beaut that Pinecreek is not so familiar with Islam. He has to stay high level, and this is something that somebody like Maverick is not used to, because he's looking at a general point of view and he's not going into the details the way that we normally do, which we should not do. This is why I love this approach. He does not get into the nitty gritty of it, but he just stays on top. And that's enough. And these people are not used to it. And that is why you can see that Maverick is completely flustered. He has no clue what he's doing. He's waffling, but it's a point anyway. And come on, he's not making any more sense now. He's completely off his track.
Yeah, it's not a point to take seriously now, because you've either granted the Christians could do the same, or you've dismissed them and said that your one is special, but you haven't provided a reason. So at the moment, those two are even. Right, let's move on to something else now, and let's see whether you can offer that, that Pinecreek perhaps can't offer the Christian alternative to. That might be a point in your favor if there is such a thing.
I don't think he realizes it, though.
You're thinking that there's a chance that Christianity is true because these disciples are willing to die for their belief in the resurrected God.
No, there's I already believe that the parts of Christianity is true.
Like, no, but it's this part. There are Christians even today who will say, I believe that Christianity is true because these apostles, they saw Jesus die and they saw Jesus rise again. And if this was all just a hoax and a lie, they would not have gone to their death believing in Jesus. But yet they did. So you would have to say this is a point for Christianity, yes?
I have no issue evaluating the claim. I don't have a problem.
Notice what happens now. Now in his mind, he thinks he's got to evaluate whether the claim is true or not. Right?
Doesn't
From
work.
the Christian's point of view, they think it's true. Whether he thinks it's true is irrelevant. They think that Muhammad isn't true. It's irrelevant to evaluating the claim. He brought this forward as a general point that people who do not believe what he believes ought to take this point seriously, i.e., why would he go through all of this, right? A Muslim will tell you why, but if you're a Christian, then his basic argument is, hey, you need to take this into account. Well, he needs to take it into account for Christianity, but now he's shifted again to go, well, I need to evaluate the content of it, i.e., whether it's true, not whether the point is the same as the point I've made. So he's kind of misunderstood it here, now changing it to, I've got to evaluate the point itself and not just that it's been juxtaposed.
With that. I'm not going to dismiss what they're saying.
But would you say this is a
obviously
point for Christianity?
It's a point that needs
Okay, it's just breaking up a bit here, right?
You're breaking up on me. I'm going to mute you. I can hear you, and now you're gone. Yeah, it's a point. I think you were going to say it's a point for Christianity that needs to be explored and explained.
He's really
and
struggling.
one could say the same thing about the Quran, right? It's a point to be looked at.
Go ahead, Stops.
No, he's just struggling. That's it.
Yeah. Because now it's like I say, a subtle change. Because the Christian would say exactly the same thing. Well, your point about Muhammad, not wanting to X, Y, and Z, and why would he go through? That's a point to be considered, right? Same thing. But that was not the reason that Pinecreek brought this up. I think we're repeating ourselves now. I think it's just that he's misunderstanding it.
And explored and explained. You're back now. And maybe you're not back. Yeah, we're having connection problems. Your way or Yahweh in Islam, as far as needing to explore it and so forth, wouldn't the same reasons to explore it with Christianity and maybe dismiss it? Couldn't we do that with the Quran and with Muhammad?
If you find anything in the Quran that allows you to dismiss it, then by all means dismiss it.
Notice how he doesn't understand the question. That's not the question as to whether the Quran is true. You gave reasons why it's unlikely Muhammad would be lying because of these considerations. The Christians give the same thing. That's the only contention, not whether the contentions are true, because each person will not believe the other person, they'll believe their own. So as far as Stops and I think, are concerned, and Pinecreek as well, they're on even ground. So the things he's brought up is actually irrelevant when juxtaposed with Christianity. But he keeps confusing this with, you've got to go look at whether it's actually true. Well, the Christian's going to look and say, well, we don't think it's true. He's going to go, hang on a moment. Actually, it's more likely to be true, because why else would he do this? And they'll go, but by that criteria, Jesus is more likely to have resurrected, because why would all of these followers put themselves through this? So it's just a complete misunderstanding.
But the point is, I don't even think people are giving it a fair chance. There's all these rumors and all these claims that people have already accepted to be true before they've even read the Quran.
Yeah, well, I'd like to back up and go to the very beginning, and that is the core proposition of Islam, or how it started, is that the God of the universe sent an angel named Gabriel to tell a man named Muhammad his very words. Correct?
Yes, but I would take issue with the fact that is the beginning of Islam. Islam only.
It's the beginning of the Quran.
Okay, the Quran it's just a.
Okay, so perhaps one of the reasons why he's hesitating is because he's already has in his head that Islam started at the time when Adam and Eve were created, right? So this idea that Islam started with Muhammad, he's just the last messenger, because they want to backdate all the way to Adam and Eve, which is why he's so, in my mind, I'm speculating why he's so cautious of accepting this. You could just say that the last revelation, or the time that the last revelation started to come, was with Muhammad, and that's how Islam, i.e. the Arabic version of this, kind of started. I mean, you could rephrase it that way, because I think that's why he's just reluctant to answer this.
It's just the latest revelation of a long line of revelations sent by God.
Okay, so to me, that's the problem. Do you personally believe that the creator of the universe told an angel to come down to earth and talk to a man named Muhammad, the very words of the creator?
Okay. See, the claim of the Quran is that God sent messengers to every nation.
Okay, but I don't
crying out loud. What the hell? Why can't he say yes? This is the standard narrative. There is no two ways around it. Come on, man.
Yeah, and the other messengers are secondary to this particular question, right? And Pinecreek's already got his hand up there because I think he's well aware of that as well. So let's just see what he
He's the
says.
seal of the prophets.
Here, brother, do you believe
but-
the statement I just
no.
said?
I mean, hear me out. There's a
Okay.
reason why I'm mentioning that. The reason why I'm mentioning that is Muhammad is simply one of those messengers.
Yeah, I don't believe any of those messengers, but I'm
I
asking
know.
about a specific one now.
Okay. But the point is, once you understand that Muhammad is simply one of those messengers, the question then becomes, would I expect or would I find it just for God to send messengers, for God to send us his messages so that we know what is expected of us? And that would be absolutely yes. Wouldn't you? If there is a creator, would you not expect him to send you a message for you to know what is expected of you?
Look what he's trying to do now. He's trying to turn it around. Now, Pinecreek was very clear. Said, listen, there's a story, there's a narrative which goes like this. Do you believe this? And instead of answering, he's hesitant. I don't even know why. This one seems to be very clear to me, but he's still saying no. And then he's trying to turn it around. If this would be like this, do you now believe this? He's trying to turn it around because he is against the ropes. He realizes this, and he's trying to somehow find a way to get away from this by asking Pinecreek a question now.
Yeah, and this is a common tactic, and sometimes we all end up doing it a little bit ourselves. We've just got to be wary of it, especially if we're doing it, but when other people are doing it, right? They'll answer a tough question, and as you quite rightly point out, to not carry on down that line, they'll tag a question on the end. This is a well-known tactic by people that I sort of follow, unfortunately, so that you now have to defend it, and it stops the line of questioning continuing. Now, if you're a good interlocutor, and Pinecreek is, I don't think you'll be sidelined very much by this.
Yeah.
But the answer to the question is very simple. If God wants to communicate, my response would be yes, I expect God to communicate. What I wouldn't expect if it wants the best possible message to come down is through messengers 1400 years ago. That is not what I would expect. My expectation is if it's for all people for all time, he will devise a method, and I've given one oftentimes, and obviously the best one be he just communicates to everybody, or he has an obelisk in the middle of every major city in every country on earth that you can go to, you can touch it, you can get his message. Then it's unfiltered, it comes straight from him, it doesn't need to be interpreted. Anybody that has any level of cognitive ability can get this message directly, and it doesn't require humans in the middle. The moment you put humans in the middle, you start to dilute the message. Now they want to claim, of course, it isn't diluted, and I mean, to the rest of us that just seems absurd. But that's what I would expect. So I wouldn't expect messengers, but I would expect a message, but just not in this transmission method. I think the method is very poor. That would be my answer to it. And then go back to the original question that I think Pinecreek was asking.
An angel and a man? No, I would not expect
What
that.
would you expect?
That he himself would give the message.
But then,
There you go. See, thank you. At least I didn't remember that, and Pinecreek and I are on the same wavelength there, right? Send it
Straight
straight
from the horse's
Yeah,
mouth.
just
Yeah.
avoid all the in-between people because they're unreliable. They're not perfect. If you want to send a perfect message and for it to be recorded and kept perfectly, then humans are not the good way to do it. Just do it yourself and then communicate it to them in some way.
It's funny that I made exactly this point yesterday evening because I published a video yesterday where I made exactly this point with the messengers using fallible brains and using a badly written book instead of the God directly coming down and telling everybody about it or implanting it in some way. That's exactly the point I made as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you use an example, right, of sending broadband, the best way to send broadband is from the original server in London, send it straight via one single fiber optic cable to every house in the country, because fiber optic doesn't have, or potentially doesn't have a distance limit. Instead, they put what they call cabinets along the way, and then it gets segmented out. So every time it has to go through something, there's a loss of signal strength. And so over time, it doesn't get as it's not as strong as if you went straight from the source. So
That's
think of that
actually
as
an
an
interesting
analogy.
analogy. I need to think about this if I can build this. Yeah, that's a good idea.
okay, but then if God, see, when you say he himself,
or itself.
okay, but we understand each other. If you're talking about God himself right now, was to show himself to you, that's assuming that God is something that vision can grasp. But that
No.
aside,
No. This is a God we're talking about. This is an all-powerful God. He can do anything he wants, so he should be able to show himself, herself, or itself just the same way as Jesus manifested himself as a human being on earth. This is the same thing that your God should be able to do.
Yeah, or even just, communicate directly to your brain, right? From his mind to your mind, right? Nothing in between
Telepathy.
that. Perfect transmission, or as close to. I mean, obviously it's not perfect, but it's as close to perfect as you can get, right? His message directly appears in your brain, and then there's nothing out there. So there's not the case. Otherwise,
without
it's just becoming more
repeaters.
unreliable. Yeah.
I like
Then-
that idea.
What's the point of who are you? How have you proven yourself as a human being? Like whether you are someone who submits to God or not. Like how have you proven yourself?
Okay, this is a common sort of thing. Hey, if he sent it in this perfect way, you wouldn't have to prove yourself. And they might add on, I don't know if he will, but hang on, this will negate your free will. And this, of course, is nonsense, because all you have to ask them is there free will in heaven? And they will say yes, because if they say no, well, then heaven is not a place necessarily that everybody would want to go to. I'd rather be on earth than a supposed perfect heaven where you're an automaton and you don't have the choice. So very few people, if any, are going to accept that heaven doesn't have free will. And so now we have, out of their own mouths, a scenario where you can have free will and only good takes place. You could even say, oh, well, there's a propensity to do evil, but nobody does it. So you still have the ability, but you lean towards, and you never do evil just because you just don't want to, right? You still have the ability. So the idea that it's necessary for you to go through this test or whatever the case is, it doesn't seem like it's necessary unless they can give a good argument as to why it's the case. Now, some Muslims might go, well, hey, you won't know good unless you know bad. Well, again, this can be communicated to you, or it can be shown to you in a vision, or whatever the case is. There's plenty of ways that God can do this such that it doesn't have to happen to you, or indeed to other innocent humans, or indeed, as we see throughout the animal kingdom, the mass amount of unnecessary suffering to animals, which is, to me, devastating against some sort of God that's supposed to be all merciful or all good. So this idea can be debunked very quickly.
Self. Like it's like you're
All
asking
that's
for heaven
irrelevant.
straight away.
That's irrelevant.
Why?
I know what you're getting at. You're getting at how dare a lowly human ask this of the creative universe, right? That's what you're getting at.
I'm not using how dare or any of that kind of speech. The point is, if you demand that God shows himself to you,
I'm not
then
demanding
there's
it.
no point of anything.
I'm not demanding it. I'm just saying this is what would cause me to change my mind about it.
Yeah,
And also this is my expectation. And my expectation could be
but
wrong.
then
That's
you would
fine.
behave accordingly, though, wouldn't you? If you saw God, if God was to show himself to you, then you would just do what is expected of you.
No.
Not necessarily.
There you go. Not necessarily. I think anybody would. They've got this idea that if you did this, you'd suddenly become a robot. And like we say, if you knew God in heaven, would you suddenly be a robot there? No, the answer is no, right? You'd have some freedom to do whatever you want to do there. You just wouldn't have a propensity to do evil. So why does it need to be different here? But you've got all this test. Okay, but then you're giving us, and we've always said this, Stops and I have said this many times, you're giving us a really crappy test. You're giving us information. It's like a maths teacher giving a maths book that you've got to study, but some of the pages are torn out, or they're in differential calculus that you don't really understand. Now you need to go to some other expert to teach it to you, but you've got to pass this test. Do you think that that's a fair test, as opposed to one that you can understand stuff that you've already been taught? You need to go memorize it or work it out, or whatever the case. It's got all its pages in the sort of maths or the language that you understand, and then you can be tested on. Which one is more fair? Now, when I put this question to Muslims, you should see how they try to squirm to get out of it. The question virtually answers itself. But because they're committed to it not being that way, they have to come up with some answer to legitimize, the torn out analogy in a different language, etc.
And the thing is that the outcome is already known. This is on top of it.
Yeah, we don't even, that's the extra nail in the coffin. We didn't even need to get there, but we could add that bit in. It's all written on our hearts. And now we go down the free will, omniscience view. And that's another nail in the coffin, right? This is just untenable for them.
The demons they've seen or experienced Allah, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Do they do exactly what Allah wants?
Okay, so they've chosen. They know what's going to happen.
Did you notice a smile there? You notice him like trying to work this out, right? It's just little things that Stops and I are aware of. We both laughed there because, Pinecreek laughed because you could see Maverick was like, "Ooh, what do I say here now?" He was going to say the word "chose" there, and then he stopped himself, right? Because they don't believe that the demons can choose. They think they're automatons.
Happened to them. And they've chosen that route.
Well, the answer is no. The answer is no. It's obvious.
You would choose that route. By the way,
no, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. But let's not get into the weeds. The main start of the Quran, the main thing I need to ask you is, do you believe that the creator of the universe, Allah, sent an angel named Gabriel? to speak to a man named Muhammad the very words? And I think you're going to say yes. Yeah.
I have no reason not to believe that.
You have no reason not to believe that.
Yes.
In my closet, I have a piece of paper.
Oh.
And a friend of mine, Myron, I've had fights with Myron, but anyway,
Okay, he's going to give an analogy now. Listen to this,
Shit,
and this will carry through, right? This is really good. Just use an analogy. It's a counterexample. It's a reductio ad absurdum. Hey, but I've got the same thing. What would you say about that? Now, of course, he'll be forced to add criteria. You keep adding criteria. And by the way, that's exactly what's going to happen now. Listen now as we go through it, how he starts to add criteria as Pinecreek just breaks down each one of these criteria and says, but hey, we've got the same. And then he sees that, oh, well, that's not good enough, right? Let me give you these extra ones. Watch what happens now. This is great in terms of this way of questioning.
you know, he said an angel appeared to him about a week ago and said he's giving the very words of God. And he wrote these words down on a piece of paper and said, Islam is false, Christianity is false, and Judaism is false. And he wrote it down. An angel.
Okay.
Do you have any reason to doubt that?
I would have to read the so-called book.
Do you have any reasons to doubt that what I just told you?
But listen to what I'm saying to you.
If you, I'll just, unless you say something stops, I won't pause it. I love listening to your laughing in the background there.
Sorry, but I'm giggling hysterically because this is so funny.
Yeah, but I won't take it that you want to say something unless you say stop, because,
Yeah, okay.
which is great. But do say stop whenever you want to, just so I know. But I'm letting everybody else know. When you hear some giggles in the background, it stops, and I know that he's finding it amusing, but he isn't necessarily wanting to stop at that very minute.
No.
I would have to read that in order for me to conclude that. The reason I said what I said about Muhammad is because I've actually read the Quran. So I've
said to you what it says. Based on that alone, do you have any reasons to doubt that the creator of the universe said those things?
But that alone is not enough. The Quran, see, the analogy that you're using is not befitting at all, because first and foremost, the Quran gives plenty of arguments and reasons why it must be from God. As a matter of fact, it even has falsification tests.
Name one.
Okay, so again, here we're going to start to go through the criteria a bit, and he's just going to break them down in the same way. So it's just an object lesson for this sort of, counter-apologetic approach.
Specific thing.
Why it must be from God?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Number one, it only talks about observable things that you can, demonstrable, observable things for you to conclude that there is a creator. Such as look around you, look at the sustenance, the usual stuff.
Stop. Okay, stop. Really, this is absolute bullshit. The Quran speaks about that God has created the universe. How can you observe this? You can't. You can say, well, there's a universe, and I maintain or I claim that this was created by God. But you cannot see. The Quran does not only talk about what is observable. It's talking about a lot of things which are definitely not observable. We're talking about absolute nonsense. And then he says everything is observable. No, it is not.
Yeah, jinns, that sort of stuff. Judgment Day is not observable. That's in the future. This is predictions or that sort of stuff that's going to happen, right? Other things, seventh heavens and Muhammad going on a horse. They claim that it happened, but it's not observable to
Muhammad
anybody
is not
else.
That's not in the Quran.
And
the flying donkey is not in the Quran.
Yeah, and also going up to Muhammad and negotiating how many prayers they've got to do and that sort of stuff. This supposedly happened, but it's not visible to anybody. But there are things that the Quran talks about, as you pointed out, that are, well, invisible in the sense that no human has seen it. There's only claims that people have seen it.
Well, the entire creation process. What is observable? How can you say everything is created from water? This is not observable. I mean, we have water, but you can't say, yeah, it's observable, and therefore the Quran talks about it. No, the Quran makes a very definite claim. Every living thing is created from water. Okay, can you observe this? No, you can't. So don't talk shit.
Yeah, and then they'll change the goalpost to, well, it contains water. Well, that's not the claim, right? So we've got to be very careful with some apologists, where they'll subtly change the goalposts when you point out something. No, but hey, what I mean is it contains, right? Like I say, I'm just finely tuned even more to that because of these 2 hours today, where this guy did this almost nonstop. It was another object lesson.
You know about the heaven and earth.
Wouldn't you know it? That's exactly what this angel told my friend Myron. And he wrote it down. He said, these are the very words of God, because look around you, look at creation, look at the observable universe. And by the way, the God of the universe says through this angel that Islam is false. Do you have any reason to doubt it?
Yes, because again, you jumped the gun, because that wasn't all that the Quran says. Yes, the Quran talks about observable, demonstrable things that we can see for us to conclude that there is a creator, but it also has falsification tests to prove that the Quran can only have come from the creator.
Like what?
Such as if the Quran is from anyone other than God, then surely there would have been in it many discrepancies, contradictions, and etc. There are none. The claim from beginning to end.
You're not going to believe this.
Itself.
You're not going to believe this.
Sorry?
You're not going to believe this. But there's absolutely no contradictions or inconsistencies in what my friend Myron wrote down from the angel Gabriel that he got from God that says Islam is false.
Okay, so just see how he keeps doing the same thing. Obviously, any of us that have read the Quran and know a bit more recognize that that claim is a false one. A, there's errors and so forth in the Quran, and we've pointed some of those out. But B, this claim that if they'd been from anybody else, in the very next verse, it actually says you'll never find any error there. So it's not a falsification criteria. Imagine I gave you a book in a language you'd never heard and said, write something like this book. And then as you take the book and you start to write, and I say, and you'll never be able to write something like this book. Right? And I haven't given you any criteria. Is any rational person going to even attempt to do this? The answer is clearly no. I've given you no criteria for doing this, and I've told you that you can never do it. And especially if I'm a powerful being, supposedly, that knows all things, would one ever take a test that you can't do and I don't have criteria for? It's utterly absurd. But just watch how Pinecreek just does the same thing. His buddy Myron, it's just amazing. It really is it's just like a massive coincidence that everything the Quran says, his buddy Myron has also got, except that Islam is false.
I've searched it. I've read it, and Myron's read it, and there's not one inconsistency. Now, it's a very short document, shorter than the Quran, but not one inconsistency. That proves it's from God.
No, well, again, that isn't enough, because the other thing the Quran does is the Quran sufficiently explains our creation in terms of how we came into existence, why we came into existence.
Like, be specific. How does it explain how we came into existence?
Well, how we came into existence is that we were created by a creator, a divine creator.
That's very specific.
Yes, just insert the creator for anything. If the creator can explain everything, it doesn't explain anything. And it doesn't explain it in any way that we can get evidence for. Their claim is poof, it happened by a miracle. Right? Some Muslims now are accepting kind of that other animals could have evolved from a common ancestor, but not humans. That's where they draw the line. At least some of the Muslims nowadays, they're being pushed in this direction. You know, it's otherwise they just look like a Kent Hovind version. So they don't want to look like that. So they're now slowly shifting the goalposts and go, well, okay, the Quran doesn't say that other animals couldn't have had a common ancestor, but it does say that humans were created from a clot of blood. Although I have come across one Shia who claims, well, that could also be interpreted, you know, if you go back far enough in time, that they had a common ancestor. Who says we can't have that? I mean, he's a virtually non-existent minority type person, but virtually all the other Muslims think there was a miracle event. How do you have evidence for that? You don't. But now they'll say, well, you know, science can't do this. Well, hang on a moment. God, you know, interfered in this world. We can, in principle, differentiate between a miracle and a natural event. If somebody's arm starts regrowing, and it's done only when Muslims pray, and we can do it under scientific conditions, I'm going to lean strongly towards that's a miracle event, and the correlation is between praying and this arm regrowing, and it happens every single time under conditions where we can rule out anything that we're aware of. Right? I'm going to lean there. I'm not going to be somebody who will go, well, maybe there's invisible aliens. Other people could do that, and that's fine. I'm not going to do that. So I will lean towards that being the case. So it's not the case that you can't use science.
And he created us. He created us using matter, biological matter, as you know, clay, and he breathed in us.
Excuse me. Look how he slips this in. He created
knows that. I think Pinecreek knows that he's just not going to tackle it.
But how he slips this in? How casual. You know, he created us from biological matter, clay. You know, and then he carries on. Clay is not biological matter. What the fuck are you talking about?
And I think Pinecreek knows it, right? And this is one of the occasions where I'd probably let that go as well. There's a bigger point here, because if you stop on every single thing, he never gets to finish. And it's like, that's where one has to make a judgment call. And in the past, I might have stopped like you immediately there, because I immediately heard the same thing. Well, obviously it's not biological matter, right? As you quite rightly point out. But are you going to, tackle every point, or are we going to wait for the bigger point? You could always bring it in later on anyway, if you remember. But yeah, there's just different ways of doing it. And of course, so let's see.
Wait a minute, clay?
Yes. Like he formed a human out of clay.
Like mud?
It's the same story as the Bible.
Okay, same story as the Bible.
In that regard. and he breathed in us his spirit.
You're not gonna believe this, but that's exactly what Myron said. That the angel told him to say on behalf of that we were created from clay and from matter, and that the God of the universe did it this way. And by the way, Islam is false. Do you believe it's from God?
Again, that isn't all it says.
Okay, now, let's stop here. You see what's happening?
No, not really, because
Not really. I think it's blatantly obvious to anybody who's paying attention. Pinecreek is just showing you that everything you said could be claimed by somebody else and now asking you, why don't you believe it? And you'll keep adding criteria and so will he. The way to get around this, Maverick, just so you know, is to give some criteria that it would be impossible, logically impossible for Myron to give in that scenario. Then you might start to have something that we can pay attention to. But if it's logically possible that Myron can do it, and all logically possible means is that it doesn't involve a contradiction, in which case, Pinecreek can postulate anything here as long as it's not contradictory. What else have you got, right? So it's again, like I say, a case study in how to do this sort of line of questioning.
You're basically picking on very few things, and somehow I'm supposed to believe that.
No. I'm not picking. You are presenting the cumulative case step by step, and all I'm doing is I'm taking those pieces and I'm transferring it to something that I know you don't believe, and it's not sufficient for you, is it?
Well, the reason it's not sufficient is because that alone is not enough. If the Quran only consisted of what I've said so far, that wouldn't be enough.
How many more pieces do you think we have to go through before you would believe that Islam is false through the text that Myron got from the angel, from the creator of the universe?
Well, let me tell you the last two. Then perhaps that will knock out Myron.
No answer.
Okay, so this is what we needed in the beginning, right? You needed, and he should have picked this up after Pinecreek did the first one. The detective should kind of, okay, what he's doing is doing the same thing as me. I'm now going to give him something unique that only Islam or Muhammad could have done, and it's impossible for anybody else. Because even if it's possible or even likely that some level of probability that somebody else could do it, now you have to argue probabilities, and that becomes very difficult. By the way, greetings to everybody who's watching from around the world. We appreciate your viewership. Hope you're enjoying it, and it's entertaining and educational. So thanks very much.
Okay, so the last two is one, the Quran has universal laws. Every single command in the Quran is entirely universal.
Meaning it applies to any situation.
Hang on. No, I'm sorry. I can't let this go. Why is Maverick lying? He knows he is lying. He knows there are commands in the Quran. You are not allowed to marry the Prophet's wives. How is that universal in any way?
Well, maybe he's going to respond by hey, I'm just speculating. I agree with you. It could only have been at the time that the Prophet's wives existed, right? Couldn't have been, something else. And he doesn't think that, the wives get beaten, so that's also not universal, but he'll have other reasons. I think that's clear that there were things at that time, right? Even slavery and so forth. He doesn't believe in slavery today, and he will agree that slavery happened then, but it was for the good of the slaves. And if you ask him today, is that okay? He'll say no. Right? So clearly there aren't things that he thinks that all things are universal.
At any time.
It applies to any situation, any time, any people, you name it. Every single human being recognizes the commands in the Quran internally.
Can you get an example of a universal law?
To put it in a nutshell, it all comes down to not transgressing against each other. Now, no human being is going to have a problem with that.
You sure?
Well, if you have a problem with that, then there's something wrong with you. Because
no,
I can comfortably say, it is sane to say that, universally speaking, human beings generally do not want to be transgressed.
Did you notice? I can universally say that, generally speaking, right? Generally is not universal. Universal is like an absolute. I can say without equivocation that no human ... That's what universal means. Not universal means that I can generally say, right? That's a contradiction in two couple of words there.
Against.
Well, that's true, but that's the different than saying it's wrong to transgress against another human being. We put human beings in jail and cages all the time.
But that's not transgressing against them.
See, that's the point. It's what might be transgressing to one person might not be transgressing to another. That's the issue.
Not at all. Not at all. Transgressions are transgressions. You're talking about situations. For instance, the jail that you mentioned. These are people that
some people like some really.
They partake in society. They know the laws. You can't call that transgression. No way, shape, or form.
My point is, some people like some really crazy stuff, like the coitus stuff. I don't like saying the word sex, but
Okay.
And other people, they
Of
would
course,
say,
how do you know?
person A has just transgressed person B, and then another person B would say, oh, I like that transgression. And it's like, it's a matter. But the point is, I could say Myron got from the angel Gabriel, from the creator of the universe, these universal laws, and you would say, no, that's not enough, and we will keep going on for a couple of hours.
Not really. Not really. Not at all.
Okay, I think we can see that this example, as he's just pointed out, falls into the same thing. He could say Myron has just said that there's universal laws, and he could replicate exactly the same ones in the Quran, but the Quran is false because there's nothing about the Quran that is like unique to the Quran. That's a good moral precept that somebody else couldn't borrow or adopt or has happened before or since. And that is so he could keep going, and he's pointing it out like a second time. No, Maverick says, I can't remember. Hopefully he'll do one more that he thinks is going to knock Myron out of the park. And I'll take a bet with you. I'm making a prediction that Myron can say exactly the same thing. Let's see.
Yeah. But the thing is that the Quran talks about flogging people. The Quran talks about a lot of things which are definitely transgressing one against the other. Now, even if you argue, no, there is no, there is no slavery or anything, there's still a lot of other things that are very, very wrong in the Quran.
But remember what's happening here as well, Stops. It's in his mind, whatever the Creator says is right. Anybody that transgresses that is wrong. Obviously, that's a claim that he can't support, but that's the mentality, that's the mindset that's being adopted here, right? So it's not. So he's resisting, Pinecreek's view of, hey, this person says no. In his mind, no. There's a single, set of commands or moral precepts that people ought to follow, and only when you transgress those are you considered a transgressor. Everything else is just people's opinion. But we've got a set that you can follow. That's the only transgressions that objectively happens. And then when you're asked to demonstrate that, of course, that's that all falls apart.
Okay, where I'm going is you're not supposed to transgress unless God allows you to transgress, and then it is not a transgression.
Correct.
Then it is just. And this is exactly the point what I'm trying to make. There are things like cutting off hands and feet and things like that, which are transgressions, but because they are commanded by God, then they are the reaction of something and therefore allowed. So there is no universal here at all. It just depends on your point of view and where you are standing.
Well, I would say Myron, if he managed to do all of that, then he would have done it after the Quran. So
it's the final revelation.
What is that point?
Sorry?
Did you notice what Pinecreek said there as well there? Yeah, and that was the final revelation, right? So it came afterwards. So that was the second last one. This is the last one, right?
It's the final revelation Myron got. So therefore it's true. As the other caller said, it's...
But if that revelation does not improve on the Quran in any way, shape, or form, then it's simply redundant.
That's not the point.
Oh, I see. So if it's improving upon a past revelation, that's more likely to be from a God?
Well, yeah.
Really?
Well, as a matter of fact, if
because Christianity is pretty bad, right? You and I
Sorry?
agree. You and I agree that the New Testament's pretty bad. The Gospels are pretty bad.
To be honest with you, the only issue I have with Christianity is I just don't think the term "Son of God" is necessary. That's it.
Well, in the Trinity, of course, is sacrilegious.
That is the whole Son of God, God incarnate, all of that. I just don't think it's necessary.
That a man.
Other than that, we don't have any differences.
Well,
what? I mean, Muslims, now, does he take the view that some of the past scriptures are not corrupted? I mean, if you had to ask him that, right, he'd have to accept that the past scriptures are corrupted. Because there's things that contradict the Bible. And in the case where something contradicts the Bible, the Muslims believe, as far as I can tell unanimously, that means that the biblical scriptures or the Judaic scriptures are corrupted. And they've actually brought the one to correct that.
Exactly. That's the whole point of the Quran.
But all Pinecreek would have to do is go, hang on, but Myron also added that under the we've added something extra now, which is embryonic stem cell research is allowed or prohibited. Right? That's not mentioned in the Quran. You can try and infer something. All you need is something, or even better, when you venture into space, you will need to pray in this way and this often because you orbit every 1 hour, 90 minutes around the Earth, yeah. Right? Or where the sun doesn't set, I now present to you when you must pray, and it's this time of the day, every day, because you now have digital clocks that are synchronized around the world. You now have an immediate improvement that Myron has added to the Quran that wasn't there, that they have to make up, and therefore it's the final revelation. Right? Not difficult to come up with something the Quran is missing. I mean, you could just think of kind of almost anything, and then by Maverick's own standard, it would have to be a revelation, and that's better. Unless he's going to claim that vagueness is in fact better than specificity. But that would just blow him out of the water. At that point, you stop talking, because now he's literally irrational.
Christianity says that you're going to hell.
But it's because of that. They just, other than
Me too, by the way.
thing, we really don't have any difference.
But Islam is an improvement on Christianity.
Islam would simply be, the case of Islam is basically, it was always the same religion. What is called Judaism, Christianity, and Islam now.
Why, Stops, if you speculate, why is he so hesitant to say that Islam is better or improves upon Christianity? Why is he
Because
suddenly
he knows the next argument is, what about Mr. Joseph Smith and Mormonism?
Yeah, or Myron.
Or
right?
Mr. Hubbard or something.
Yeah, I think it's
or
because
Byron, yeah.
Yeah, it must be Myron, because if Myron comes and does something extra, then he'd have to concede that that's the final revelation. So now they're basically equal. But okay, but then by that standard, if Myron brings the same things afterwards, then surely that's a revelation. What would be great here, and I don't know if Pinecreek will do it, is nail him down on what the criteria is that something is a revelation. What's the criteria? Does it improve? Is it the same thing that's said clearer after the fact? What is it that makes it a revolution? Then present him a hypothetical and say, why is this not a revelation, right? And I think that's probably why he is being so cautious in answering that.
That's made to look like three separate religions was always the same Abrahamic religion. Hence why it says in the Quran, ask the Jews and the Christians, what was Abraham?
But you just said, I think you just said the Quran is an improvement. It's an improved revelation, yes?
But that's because we don't consider the New Testament a revelation at all.
Okay, what is it improved on then compared to Judaism?
It's fixing what they've done. So basically, Jesus
Fixing what they've done. Notice how this is like, this is
Cagey.
sophistry now, right? This is, I won't say dishonest, but it's sort of borderline with that. What is it fixing that they've done? What is it? Who are they and what have they done, right? They are as in like the scriptures. What is it? Mostly the biblical scripture, although probably Judaism to whatever degree. And it's improved because that's corrupted. That's what it's done. But why are you not being honest about this?
was given the gospel.
Yes.
However, what we have now is not the gospel of Jesus, but it's the gospel according to God knows how many men.
I'm looking up right now words from Jesus to Joseph Smith. Guess what he said? He said something very similar to what you just did. That the gospel that Jesus was going to give Joseph Smith, who's the founder of Mormonism, was an improvement upon the Christianity found in the Gospels. And that's very similar to what you just said. But I don't think for 1 second you believe Mormonism is true, or more likely to be true because it's an improvement on the revelation.
I don't believe in religions, full stop.
Or, I mean, you don't even believe, I don't think you believe, or do you, that Mormonism is reflecting in any way, shape, or form the creator of the universe, do you?
No, I don't, to be honest with you though, I have to be honest. I don't know much about it. But the reason I don't know much about it is, fact of the matter is, you can't improve on the Quran. So
you can't.
Mormonism, I believe, came after the Quran.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, so notice what's going on here, right? Pinecreek is trying to nail him down on the criteria by which you would call something a revelation, right? And whatever he gives, Pinecreek will say something to counter that. And then he will shift the goalposts. That's why he's very cagey at the moment, right? And as I say, I think this is a great technique because he's so used to thinking that he knows it all about the Quran and he's got the right interpretation and you've got the wrong one, etc., etc. And Pinecreek's doing none of that, right? Just doing a juxtapose with other views out there and showing him that any criteria he brings can be appealed to in a future, revelation or a past one or whatever the case is. And this sort of undermines the whole position here.
You can't improve on the Quran.
No, you cannot. That's one of the falsifications. As a matter of fact, the Quran says this is one of the falsification tests. If it's not from God, then all men can gather together. All of men can gather together and try and produce a chapter like it. And the reason it says produce a chapter like it is, it's not. I know people always hear about the poetry, the language. It's not only that. It's also the content. It's always about basically how to live, how to the laws between you and your missus, your parents, wars, inheritance, stuff like that. So
does the Quran say thou shalt not have slaves?
Sorry?
Does the Quran say you shouldn't have slaves?
The Quran does not recognize the word slaves.
Okay, so there's an improvement of the Quran right there. If the Quran would have said, don't own people as property, would that be an improvement in the Quran?
No, because the Quran already covers that by number one, when it comes to economy, you can't.
Okay, so he is claiming that it doesn't involve slavery. And because he's a Quranist, he's going to ignore all the hadiths, right? And he thinks that sort of gets him out of it. Presumably, he accepts the Sunnah, or does he not accept that either?
No, he doesn't.
Yeah, so he thinks this
He only accepts the
extricates him.
Quran. No. But the thing is, it's not whether or not the Quran accepts or does not recognize slavery. The point that Pinecreek is making, if it did say do not do that, it would be an improvement. Now, Maverick is not used to that. You can see he's totally out of his depth here. He doesn't know what the fuck is happening. So he's going and saying, well, no, you're criticizing the Quran. He's not. He's saying any text can, if it doesn't say do not keep slavery, can be approved on if you add do not own other human beings. This is the point that Pinecreek is making, but Maverick does not know that. He doesn't understand that because he's got the blinkers on, which everything that you say is attacking his Quran, which is not happening. So this is not an internal critique at all. This is totally external, where he's going, if it were to put this in there, it would. And obviously it would, of course. But he thinks that what Pinecreek is saying is slavery is bad and the Quran propagates it. That's not what he's saying. So it's amazing to see the failure of the human brain if you are locked on a track and you cannot look left or right and you will not recognize if somebody comes from a totally different direction.
Yeah, because what he's going to argue in a roundabout way is the Quran does actually forbid slavery. But all Pinecreek's saying is if it was clear in the Quran, then that would be even better. And what he does, like you say, I don't think he realizes what he's saying is, no, if it's unclear, but you can infer it through my long roundabout explanation, well, somehow that's better. My immediate question is, okay, and I had this the other day with somebody, and I go, okay, what is the criteria for better? We need to nail this down before we go any further here. Because if you're saying that that cannot be improved upon, I want to know what those criteria are, and let's see whether you can hold to those criteria. And when I did this with somebody recently the other day, and I said, well, this is not the best book. And he said to me, well, it's the best book that Allah did. And I said, how do you establish that? He said, because that's what Allah sent. And at this point, I'm going, we're done here. This is no longer, so A, it's a circular argument, but B, it's as the philosopher Jeremy Koons points out, he uses it with regards to the Euthyphro dilemma. It's now unintelligible. And unintelligible doesn't mean that you don't understand what the words are, but unintelligible means that when you say something is best, but you have no content value, no background information by how you can evaluate it, the word best is now unintelligible. It has no meaning in any context.
Senseless, yeah.
So it's then vacuous. Then we can just dismiss it. By that standard, anything's the best. If you've got no standard by which to judge it, which is how we do everything in life, and you're saying, well, this is above that, then you just making a faith-based claim, and anybody could do the same, right? So at this point in time, I would love to see Maverick nail down on what it means to be the best, because all it's going around is there's a roundabout explanation he's going to give now about slavery. Somehow that's better than Pinecreek's view, which is thou shalt not own slaves. One sentence, clear, concise, would be better in virtually everybody's view who's sane and rational than the long explanation we're about to get. But essentially what he's going to argue is, no, the way I'm going to explain it now, this is better. Okay, well, how do you establish better then?
Cheat people. When it comes to having prisoners of war.
Does the Quran say do not own people as property?
It doesn't need to.
But if it did, would that be an improvement on the Quran?
No, but if it doesn't need to, then that's a bigger improvement.
Why do you say it?
There you go. If it doesn't need to, that's a bigger improvement than if it does. Now let that sink into anybody's brain who's watching that. A book doesn't have to say don't do something, because if it alludes to it, well, that's better than saying it directly. Let that sink in for a moment.
It doesn't need to. You can't improve better than that.
Because to me, that's very clear. There's very few ways to misinterpret that. And the Quran doesn't say that, right?
Yes, because the Quran lays law so that you cannot acquire that. How would you need to acquire it before you? How would you acquire it?
I wonder, Stops, you've had more conversations, or maybe you remember, does he think that Muhammad ever owned slaves?
No. He has this. Muhammad was a guy who was a prophet. He was pure. He did not do anything wrong, and anything that you know about the prophet is from the Quran, because there is nothing about the life of Muhammad in the Quran, and therefore this is not something that can be known. So he is just taking this pure and bright sort of description, where the Prophet is the one to follow, the Prophet is the one who should be obeyed. It's between Allah and the Prophet, and that is it. And he takes it to be Muhammad, but there is nothing about Muhammad in the Quran, and therefore he does not know anything about Muhammad.
Yeah, it just seems to me that you'd want to know as much as possible about, your ideal moral example, so that you can follow it, because as you say, not all of Muhammad's life is there, and there's tons of stuff you could add to the Quran in very many circumstances where you go, okay, what did Muhammad do? We just follow that, right? And it's not in the Quran. And it seems to me that I'm speculating the reason he doesn't accept hadith and sunnah is because there's so many other problematic things. So he thinks if he can get rid of those two, then he somehow can have a coherent worldview. But then you're missing so much other context and so many other things that are not in the Quran. It just seems to me, it's trying to throw out trying to throw out just the bathwater and keep the baby. But I just don't think you can do that.
Yeah, but remember, we were the ones who actually taught him this. We were the ones who took him into this jungle of hadith. And I think this is where we realized, no, I cannot go with the hadith because it's going to eventually prove me wrong. And this is when he changed. Remember, he left, and then half a year later, he came back as a Quranist. And I think this is what happened to him, where he realized he couldn't. And I think at some stage, people today must be able to realize that there is something fundamentally wrong with Islam because it's based on the Quran. There must be.
Well, everybody who's not a Muslim or hasn't read it and hasn't taken the time to try and understand it to the best of their ability, so they'll either not have read it or they'll appeal to their scholars. And if the scholars give you something that doesn't sound like a contradiction in your head, you can sleep happily. I mean, the Christians do that as well. Some of them, many of them, have never read the entire Bible, but go to church, hear the pastor saying something to them or the priest. And as long as it's not contradictory and it kind of marries with their morals for the most part, then they'll be fine. And the church will slowly change its position over time, and so will some Muslims. They're now accepting, evolution of other species. That used to be something that most Muslims didn't accept. And one of our favorite characters also says that now. He used to be against that, right? But there's evidence of him saying that. But there was also evidence of Maverick in Speaker's Corner defending the hadith and child marriage and stuff like that against Sarah, right? If you go and look online, Sarah versus Maverick, you'll find a video there where he's defending this, right? So as you quite rightly pointed out, he did change from accepting hadiths to changing and accepting only the Quran. But then you just miss so many other things that are in there. But maybe for him, it's like, okay, which is the worst thing here? Okay, I'll miss out some of these things, but at least I don't have to accept any of these other bad things.
There was no slaves back then?
Not according to the Quran.
There's no slaves on planet Earth according to the Quran 1,600 years ago.
When the Quran deals with the last prophet, see, when it comes to slaves, the Quran already deals with that when it comes to the children of Israel. That's the whole reason children of Israel were saved from Moses, because he had them enslaved.
But there were slaves 1,400 years ago in the world somewhere.
Well, the community that the Quran is dealing with the Quran does not.
Right, but these are universal laws, you said, not just the community.
Yeah, but I know they're universal laws, but universally, if the Quran does not allow you to acquire,
if there were slaves 1,400 years ago somewhere on planet Earth, what?
Why are you ignoring that? It doesn't allow you to acquire one.
But someone.
Okay, so what's the evidence for that, right? Then you'll go through all of his rationalizations for how that's the case. And then the only question, which is the question that Pinecreek originally asked, is that better, as in more clear, concise, easy to understand for all people because it's universal? Remember his claim, universal. Or is your long-winded inference, inferring your explanation, a better one for all people around the world? Think about it. If you had to give a message to few people and you gave the Maverick version and you give thou shalt not ever own another human being as property, which one of those is better as a message universally for all people around the world? And the question answers itself, except if you're Maverick.
And the thing is, you can add anything. You can add there, brush your teeth, don't drink alcohol. You can add a whole lot of things. Don't use violence. Use your brain. Learn how to play chess. Anything that you put in there, that would be a universal, useful command. But you don't find this in the Quran. Instead, you find, okay, it doesn't matter. Yeah, go ahead.
Might have acquired a slave. Yes?
But then you'll be going against it.
Yes.
If you're not allowed to acquire one in the Quran, then you're going against the laws already.
But if someone who lived, let's say, I don't know, in northern Asia, far away, has slaves, travels into the community and says, what's this? People are Muslims here. What's this book, Quran? Opens it up and reads, you should not own people as property. And he goes, well, I've owned people for property for years, but I'm convinced it's the word of God, so I should get rid of my slaves. But if he reads, you should not acquire slaves, then he said, okay, from this point on, I'm going to stop acquiring slaves because that's what the Quran says. But he doesn't get rid of his slaves. He just stops acquiring them. I just gave you an improvement. I just gave you an improvement on the Quran. Yes?
I'll tell you how you.
Notice as well in the background, I know it's dark, but notice what happens with the body, right? It's unintentional. You just don't know it, right? It's this uncomfortable shifting, right? You don't see that. When he's confident, the body is still, maybe the hands are moving because he's passionate, but the shoulder movement, the top body movement is a sign of uncomfortableness, right? It's blatantly clear that Pinecreek has provided a scenario that if the Quran said thou shalt not own slaves, it would be better than saying you shouldn't acquire them if somebody's come from somewhere else and already has slaves. And now you see, okay, let's hear how he tries to explain this away. Remember, in our minds, what we're saying is that he claimed that it was the best. You can't improve upon it, right? He's been given a scenario. How does he rationalize that, in fact, what his claim is better than what Pinecreek has suggested?
No, I'll tell you how you did it. I'll tell you how you did it. I'll tell you how you did it. Because number one, when it comes to dealing with people economically, you cannot cheat them, according to the Quran. Number two, when it comes to having prisoners of war, you can only keep them until the war lays down its burden. So if you cannot...
Oh, by the way, just in case you think that part's a small thing, that he claims is not slavery. Virtually every other Muslim does, and they justify it by saying, hey, what else would happen to these people? So let's take them as slaves, right? And at some point we might let them go, or we might not, or whatever the case is, right? But this, booty of war, he thinks is not slavery. Just in case anybody thought, but but this is his view, right? That when you take these people, well, they're what, prisoners of war? This is his own interpretation. I mean, I don't know any other Muslim that does this. But he will claim, of course, he's got the right interpretation and everybody else has got the wrong one. Virtually every other Muslim is going to say, well, hang on a moment, there are slaves, but it's the best thing to do. It's the most moral thing. And then you could have the discussion about whether it's the most moral thing. And so he's just an outlier here. Good luck convincing anybody else, or in fact that he's got the best interpretation. Because as we heard earlier, there's different interpretations.
Not keep a prisoner of war till basically after the war, and you cannot cheat people economically, and you cannot fight people unless it's for self-defense. There is no way for you to keep that slave or acquire one. So you can't keep him because you can't fight him, and you can't cheat him in terms of economically, and you can't keep him if he's a prisoner of war if the other people are not fighting you anymore.
So again, this person that's come from Asia with his slaves, where does it say this in the book that he can read this and go, do you know what? I need to sell these slaves now and never take another one. Or Pinecreek's view, he opens the book on the first page, it says, thou shalt not own slaves. Which is better? This sort of convoluted thing that you've got to go and find and try and infer things somewhere in the book, or this being a moral precept on the first page or the second page or whatever the case is, which one is better?
It's so easy, yeah.
See how many words it took to explain that?
There you go.
When all the Quran could have said is don't own people as property, which includes people who've already acquired them and are finding the Quran for the first time. It's an improvement.
The Quran is talking to intelligent people.
Oh, right. From the frying pan into the fire. So the Quran is only for intelligent people. So if you're a nitwit or a less intelligent person, well, then the Quran doesn't apply to you. Well, great. So any unintelligent person can own slaves then by this lights. I mean, but the ad hoc rationalizations he comes with in the moment. Look at Pinecreek's laughing. I didn't stop it there on purpose. It is hilarious that a human mind can try and post hoc rationalize like this.
By the way, if somebody's interested, there's hadiths which actually go and say, if you recite the Quran fluently, you get the reward of Allah. But if you go and you make a mess of it and you really try hard, but you're stuttering and you're stumbling and things like that, your reward will be 10 times that. Because you're struggling, because you're really, really trying, and it's not easy for you. So if it's more of an effort, you get more of a reward from God. This is and this is quite a nice way of saying it, okay? If you're really trying hard, then it shows that you are putting more effort into it. And I like that.
Yeah, it's like the greater the test, the greater the reward, right? I've asked Muslims about that. We won't go on that side tangent at the moment. But just notice this. And he still wants to claim, right? I think the only thing is like, Pine doing a great job. I just keep asking the question for the audience as well. Are you saying this is the best? Every single time he gives a rationalization, are you saying it's better than this? And you don't even need to respond to it. You just need to ask the question and let the discerning audience listen out. Because no rational person would say that what his claim is better by any standard that we can call better, unless he's going to come up with some post hoc, methodology for what better is.
Anyone intelligent would understand that. And I think you know what you're doing. You're being facetious.
Well,
No, he's actually uncovering your ideas, and the fact that you think it's
Exactly.
facetious is like there's no self-introspection here. You should be really considering being an atheist, or at least leaving Muslim now. But he'll go away from this probably, going, you know what? That's enhanced my faith, like Ali Dawa and that lot, right?
to me, it's as obvious that the Quran could have been better.
Pinecreek, you're not alone. Any other rational person agrees with you, apart from Muslims. And why? Because they are committed to not doing so. And then you hear, and there again, could you see him moving around there trying to get comfortable? Subconsciously, he knows it. There's an internal battle going on here with the body and him trying to rationalize it. And it gets displayed in body language, very, very hard to control unless you're an expert like a CIA type operative or whatever the case is. Somebody like this, most of us, it's going to be displayed in our body. And once you can correlate that, you can see what's going on.
Yeah, but I wonder whether this is on an intellectual level that he realizes there's something wrong here, or whether this is on a more physical level where he feels that he's being subdued.
Yeah, I think well, he said it's being facetious, right? That's the words he's using. So it's a case of like, you almost like you're taking the piss, because there's a level of uncomfortableness here with him. And Pinecreek is not doing anything tough. I mean, you and I, he doesn't like, because we go into the details and stuff and we do a harder job. Pinecreek's not doing that. It's much softer and everything. So he can't say he's being rude or obnoxious, but he's being facetious. Well, what does that mean? You're putting me in an uncomfortable position for which I don't have good answers. And if I had to listen back to this myself, or I heard this from anybody else, I'd think that they were nuts, that they weren't being reasonable. But because it's coming out of my own mouth,
whether the torture is physical or more intellectual. This I don't know.
no, I don't know. I have to speculate on that one.
But you would say that though, because you have a vested interest in saying that.
Do you have a vested interest?
No,
in
he
yourself?
doesn't.
Not at all. I am completely. I would challenge anybody. Open up the Quran and see if you can challenge anything in the Quran.
No.
Okay, so what happened there? He said to him, well, Pinecreek's got a vested interest in trying to prove the Quran wrong, essentially. And he asked, have you got a vested interest essentially in holding to it? And he goes, no. Now, again, if we've watched up until now, if your reviewers watched up until now and attempted to hear the post hoc rationalizations of this guy, and him now wanting to claim he doesn't have a vested interest in Islam, I don't know how much worse this can get, to be honest. How much, level that he doesn't realize what he's doing here. And I think maybe it's a case, and I've seen other people do it, right? It's almost like your brain switches off in a sense. At this moment in time, there's zero ability for self-introspection, for recognizing what you've said or are saying, and just, it has to, it's like a self-defense mechanism that has to switch off. Because if you stood back and watched this again yourself, you go, no. Or if I put somebody else's, if I tweaked the name and changed who it was, but, had the same voice and asked him to listen to this, right? And he didn't remember that he had said it, he wouldn't be accepting this.
I wonder whether he does. I mean,
No,
watch this
that's
again.
not my question. My question is, do you have a bias towards Islam?
Not at all.
How would your life be different if you left Islam tomorrow?
Great question. How would your life be different if you left Islam tomorrow? Right? It's not a question that most Muslims think about, but he said like he's not committed to it. How would it be different? Right? And so now he's got to think. Great question to stop in that moment in time and for him to start thinking. You can't really see it there, but I think he's kind of, his eyes are looking up to some degree, and we'll hear in a minute. When you look up, it's like you're trying to figure something out. It's not something that you have in your memory. It's something that you are looking to work out. The way the eyes look, amazingly enough, will tell you whether somebody is telling you something from what they remember or something that they are rationalizing in the moment. And that's kind of a tell sign as well when you understand these techniques.
If I left Islam tomorrow, then
Look how he's
life would
looking
feel
up.
like it's purposeless.
Whoa, that alone is a pretty strong bias towards Islam.
Not at all.
Well, don't you want purpose in your life?
I don't believe in Islam because of what I desire. My desires have absolutely nothing to do with it.
Are you sure?
100%.
But you desire purpose, and Islam gives you purpose. Yes.
Yes, but my desires have nothing to do with reality. So that's not the concept.
Well, of course, your desires have something to do with reality. To think that, unless you are Spock, and sometimes people say, oh, Rob, you're Spock, or whatever the case is, to say your desires don't have an impact on your worldview is, unless you are a robot, is complete nonsense, right? They have a desire, whether you are either aware of it or are prepared to admit it, your desires have some consideration in how you view the world and how likely you are to make a change. I said it today, actually, because I've read a concept of a God that I would want a relationship with if it existed. I'm not as resistant to some concept of a God than other atheists. And I think because other atheists haven't come across a concept that they might be comfortable with, if there were evidence, they're more resistant. Could well be the case. And I've seen some atheists who just wouldn't accept any version of God because they've never heard one that could be something that they could accept, right? So there is that consideration. Whether we agree with it or not, it's there somewhere. So this is just nonsense.
Well, some would say the reality in here is more real than anything else. Some would say.
I'm not of those kind.
So if you didn't get purpose from Islam, if you left Islam tomorrow, do you think you could get purpose in something else? Through something else?
I would occupy myself just like most people are. I'm sure you are yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd move on. I'd occupy
Rob,
myself.
just hang ten. I don't quite understand. If he says there is, if you left Islam, how would your life be different? And he says, well, I would. So then why is he a Muslim? Why doesn't he now change it around and say, well, if you don't care about it, why are you then?
Well, because Maverick wants to make the view here, or has the view, or wants to put forward the view that this is entirely intellectual based, and his psychology and his emotionality has got nothing to do with it. And so that's why he wants to go this route. But if it's a case that Islam gives you greater purpose or intrinsic purpose, and there was a tonality shift there as well that I heard in my mind, and obviously I wanted you to speak first, but there was a tonality shift. He said, oh, I'll do something like you, right? I'll be like you or whatever. Like it was like a downtone, like it's not as good. And if it's the case that it's not as good, i.e. by his lights, that you'll have some other, human constructed purpose, and Islam gives you a greater purpose, then that is a consideration. And if you're going to say that's not, I think then you're being intellectually dishonest. Because if there's a greater purpose under Islam and there's a lesser purpose under atheism or whatever it is by his lights, then that is going to be a consideration. And to ignore that, it's just, I think intellectually dishonest. Or he's just not even aware of that he's doing it anymore.
But the reason I believe in Islam, look, can I not be intellectually convinced? Is that not possible?
No, I think you believe you're intellectually convinced.
Could you be convinced
that Islam is true? Yeah.
No, could you be convinced that that there is a creator and a revelation could have possibly come from him?
Yep.
Would you be convinced
Hold
of that?
up the napkin.
It's coming.
What would it take?
Here's some sparkling ice.
Exactly.
I want you to pray in the name of Allah to light this on fire right now.
You called it, Stops. You haven't watched this. You called it, and there it is, right? The famous light this on fire thing, right? Deceptively simple, and yet look again how he moved, right? If you watch this video back, if you scroll back a moment, you'll see how the body moves, right? This uncomfortableness. It's almost like this is so ridiculous, and yet it's so simple, isn't it?
Why would God Almighty do that?
He doesn't have to.
So exactly. So why would he?
Why would he?
He
To convince
wants
you.
you as part of the club.
There you go. If God wants to convince all people, and this is your criteria by which he's given you the brain to assess it and come to this criteria, and he wants you, then why wouldn't he do that? And if he doesn't do it, that's evidence against the claim. Right? Why would he do it?
It would be a
That's the
brilliant
reason
marketing
why.
message. That's it.
Exactly.
Because if he wants me to believe, that's what it will take.
So do you
If he doesn't
think
want me to believe, then that's fine. I just
So,
ruined
okay,
some
so you-
sparkling ice for that demonstration. I got more left though.
So you think he should make you believe?
No, if your God's real, he doesn't need to do anything. I'm just saying, what would change my mind? You asked me the question, what would convince me? I told you.
But why does it take special measures to convince you?
Because I'm a special guy.
Okay, but it's, whatever the measure is, everybody's going to have their criteria. That's his one. God knows that, presumably. Trivially easy to light that on fire. I've got an even higher standard than Pinecreek, but then I'm doing it seriously. He's doing it, although he may, if it were the case, he would certainly think twice about it, possibly. But that's the reason why, right? Everybody's special. They're going to have their own criteria. The fact that your criteria is much, much lower and you and all other Muslims, Maverick, isn't a point in your favor. It's actually a point against you. You should have a higher criteria. And if God wants you to, he could meet that. And if he doesn't want to, then either he doesn't care or he can't do it. In which case, it's both his problem, not ours.
Exactly.
Don't you think that's arrogant?
No.
No.
Well, what would make you special?
I'm just saying, you asked me what would change my mind. I gave you an answer. Now, I know you don't like that answer because I think you believe your God would never do such a thing.
No,
right?
No, it has nothing to do with light. I'm just curious.
Is your God capable to light that on fire? Is Allah capable to light this on fire?
That's a silly question. If God created the universe, you're asking a silly question then, aren't you?
So he can do it, yes? I am not trying to trick myself or my viewers. If you pray right now to Allah and ask him to light this on fire, I will believe in the supernatural realm. I will believe that there could be this idea of a God. I will start reading the Quran. I'm dead serious. I'm not lying to you because I'm not trying to trick myself.
But what I don't understand.
Stops, just make a comment quickly. Somebody's just come home, so I'm going to mute for 1 second. So just make a comment on this, please.
Okay. What is quite weird is exactly that it is so simple. And this is the beauty of it, that at the moment, Maverick doesn't know what to do with it. Because he's asking him straight out, is your God capable? Is it an all-powerful God that is capable? Does it have the capability to do this? And the obvious answer must be yes. So if the God is, number one, interested in getting more members, number two, wants to establish itself as the God of the universe, is interested in making people believe in this so that he can then go and provide some sort of, what is the opposite of punishment? Reward. That he wants to reward people and is able to do that, then he should be able to do that right here and now, and he doesn't. And Maverick realizes this. And this is why he's going to be shifting and eyeing and writhing like crazy, because he realizes there is something that has just outsmarted him.
Trivially easy thing for God to do, and he's not doing it.
Yeah.
Understand though, is the level you've put yourself and the level you've put God. Like God has to go through.
Even if you're
it's arrogant.
So what?
It's deluded.
No,
so what?
It's deluded.
So what?
No, but you're saying deluded, and so what?
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen?
Well, if you're deluded, then you're not going to really understand reality, then are you?
Well, I don't agree with you, but so what?
But if you're saying,
you know what's ironic about this, X, is I think you would be impressed if it happened. I think.
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
As a matter of fact, if it happened, I would think little of God.
Oh, my word. So if God did a miracle today in front of your face and you prayed and it happened, you would think less of God. I mean, this is just extraordinary. It's like your speeches. You think less of God if a miracle happened in front of you today. Let that sink in. How many times have we said that in this review? Wow.
Oh, really?
Let me tell you why. Yeah, because why would he feel the need, like, to do that?
Okay, you think it's the okay?
It's not
okay.
his need, it's
what if
your
we were to
need.
do it for someone else who's suffering? Would that be better?
Exactly.
Suffering of what?
Well, okay. For example, I have a brother-in-law. My sister died last year. She's dead. She's been in the grave for a year. Pray in the name of Allah that she'll come back to life. So my brother-in-law, who's still suffering from her death, can stop his suffering. If you do that, pray in the name of Allah, and she comes back to life, I will become a Muslim.
There you go. Right, straightforward. There's a criteria.
Okay.
Is that arrogant? Is that arrogant?
What? Yeah, it is arrogant. Let me tell you why.
This is arrogant, right? This is empathetic. If this God existed and he wanted to write this, but then again, Maverick could have always come back with the idea, well, that's just a test. But then the question is the greater the reward, the greater the test, in which case then you ought everybody's family member or die straight away so they go through a greater test, right? You can always play that card as well. So the greater the reward, the greater the test, doesn't get them out of it. It makes it even worse.
It's arrogant. Because what makes you think you're entitled to this life?
Is there anything demonstrable that Allah could do right now that's not arrogant?
Well, what he can do right now is what he already did.
No,
It's
that's
simply-
past
it's
tense.
sim-
Right now. Let's do something right now.
Why is that necessary?
Is it possible?
It's possible, but is it necessary?
I'm saying for me it is.
Why?
Because that's the way Allah made me. I need demonstrable,
So,
empirical
so,
evidence.
so you're blaming it on God.
Was that wrong?
So it's God's fault that you're being married.
Well, tell you what,
Yes.
is that wrong?
You're not choosing.
Yeah, let's stop it there.
Yes.
Is it God's fault? He created us. He knows what we're going to do. Or even if you're not going to agree with that, which it says it's written on your heart, unless you're going to reinterpret that to not mean what straightforwardly means, which is that He's going to guide you and it's written on your heart. Even if we just granted the lesser claim, which you have a propensity, to in Pinecreek's case, to want this to be the case, then yes, it's God's fault. Who else's fault is it? He didn't choose to be made the way he is by your light. Remember, we're talking about under your model. This is an internal critique under your model. If Pinecreek is just a Muslim who's denying it, or we all are, then he was made this way. He didn't choose it. And that's his standard, that again, he didn't choose in any conscious sense himself. So does Allah want him, or is he destined to hell no matter what? In which case, how is Allah all merciful? You see how this just untangles. The more we talk about it, the more you try and explain this, the worse it actually gets for you.
And you know what is even worse? It says it in the Quran. It gives you exactly the instructions. All you need to do is pray, and a table full of food will appear in front of you. Now, imagine all the children that are dying, the children of Muslim parents, by the way, who are dying right now. And imagine what you could do if you were to go and pray in front of them and have this table with food come down from heaven. This is what it says in the Quran. This is all it would take. This would be empathy, and it would show compassion towards the children of Muslim parents who are doing their best to raise them, and they can't because they don't have enough food, and so the children die. And this God could change this if he wanted. Is he testing the parents or the children by killing those children? Really?
Probably all of them, right? But if you believe prayer has any effect in the world, and you were a discerning person, you would pray, and as you pointed out, Stops, you'd pray for at least for your Muslims to start with in Yemen and other places where there's famine and hunger, unless you're just going to sit back and go, well, it's all a test. At that point, though, then we can look at you as a moral person, because you can't even defend it's all a test. Because when I ask you, the greater the reward, the greater the test, and we start to go down that route, you'll find that you don't believe that any more than anybody else does. It's lip service that you're giving to it. So just pray, have this happen, so that these small children, right, that don't even understand this yet, are, their suffering is alleviated. How many humans here, is there any rational moral person that would look at a small child, 1 or 2 years old, that is starving and go, oh, well, it's just a test. They just need to go through the test. Is there anybody with any empathy that would do that? Would he do that? And if he says yes, that's all we need to know. And he has to say yes to be consistent. So he takes himself down this route that he would end up being very likely some sort of moral monster that would look at a 2-year-old child and go, well, that's just a test. Because the only way to save that child, or for that child to not have that suffering, is for you to pray and the food to come about. And you won't even attempt to do it. Man, if I was a Muslim and I saw that, I'd be doing it. I'd be praying. But of course, and I'd be angry if it didn't come. Because it's not even for me. It's for somebody else, a child that can't even do anything.
And he even mentioned the sustenance.
What is?
Yeah.
Is that bad to
what
be
is-
arrogant against Allah?
To be arrogant, full stop, is bad.
Okay.
Don't you
So
think?
I
Is
want,
arrogance a good thing?
let's ask Allah for justice then. Let's ask Allah to kill me right now and punish me for my arrogance, because Allah is a just God. Can you do that for me?
Okay. Now check this out. What is
See this? By the way, if you're viewing this, right, we know Maverick a little bit. When he says check this out, it's like a placeholder. Let me think about that. I'm not sure. That's a tough question, right? Now check this out. Right? He's not prepared. If he's being, again, if his claim is that he's being arrogant, etc., and Allah's all just, then, and arrogance is a bad thing by his own life, then you ought to pray for him to not be that, right? Now check this out.
if he knows something that you don't right now?
Sure.
Which is, check this out. How about just as a thought experiment? Maybe right now you're really passionate about your position, but he knows that perhaps you may change your tune if he gives you some time.
There's nothing your God can do right now, is there? He's impotent.
Beautiful, right? So this hypothetical, Hey, something could happen in the future. Yeah, that's like, hey, Judgment Day will come, right? Yes, and I'm a better predictor of Judgment Day than any God ever be. It will guaranteed happen in the next 5 billion years, and it cannot be longer than that. And we know that, right? So, and this is a great question. So get through all of this hypothetical thing that actually is vacuous anyway. There's nothing your God can do right now. Just get it straight back to the basics.
But syncretism is asking a good question. And the thing is that it seems to me that the less this God does, the less this God appears, the more wonderful it is.
But yeah, because apparently he's done everything in the Quran, and yet he hasn't done it, and he hasn't done it in the best way. That was blatantly obvious with thou shalt not own slaves, that he tried to squirm out of by saying, hey, you can go and read all of this. Let me give you this long explanation, and that's quote unquote better. Yeah, I mean, it's silly, isn't it?
There's nothing. No, he's doing things all the time. Who?
Great. He's doing things all the time. How would we establish whether he's doing something or not? What's the falsification criteria? I often ask this, right? When I hear something like that, he's doing this all the time. It's like immediately a red flag goes off in my mind. And the question I ask somebody is, what would the state of affairs need to be such that you would go, hang on a moment, he's not involved in this. He's not doing something now. What would that need to look like? Because that gets somebody to think. Now, sometimes maybe I could phrase that question a bit easier. Perhaps that might be something to think about, but I often go, okay, give me, in my mind, I was like, okay, that's unfalsifiable. Now, what would it need to look like such that you would accept that that's not the case? But he's now just put an unfalsifiable. He's doing something all the time. How do we know? Compared to what?
Who sustains this universe,
Okay.
do you reckon?
I'm asking Allah to stop sustaining my life right now. Can he do it? There's a ton of people who are watching right now who
Should
convert to
you-
Islam. If I died right now on stream,
Okay, well, check this out, Pinecreek. If you was the Almighty, just as a thought experiment, if you was the Almighty, would you let a little human being dictate to you?
I'm just saying. Does Allah want me to believe in Islam?
What is
Notice
prayer? What the fuck is he talking about?
Yeah.
He's telling people to pray 5 times a day, and then he says, well, come on. What?
But look at how he tries to turn this around, right? You're arrogant. Why would Allah do this? Well, because Allah wants to convince people. He wants to bring people. Unless anybody who's watching this, or Pinecreek himself, Allah says, well, I don't want them. But then that contradicts the view that this is for all people for all time.
Exactly.
Because if there's something like this happen, more people are likely to consider, if not join Islam. Right, here was a critic of Islam that literally asked to be killed and drop dead in his chair. Even you and I stops with, I would stop and go, okay, either that's the biggest coincidence ever or something else happened here. Right? It would be literally a shock to me if that happened right now. And I'd be going, okay, I wonder, right? So, yeah.
No, but you're trying to dictate to
So what?
God.
Yes.
You're not in a position to dictate
Okay, then too bad.
for you.
Why?
Well, for anybody, right? When he says dictate, right, all we're asking for is for God to meet our criteria. And he now wants to reframe that, call it, well, you're dictating. Well, yes, I'm putting forward my criteria. No, he doesn't have to meet it. But if he's a just God and a merciful God and he wants me to join him, then I've got a simple criteria. In this case, Pinecreek, either drop dead or light that thing on fire. Trivially easy. I mean, obviously he can do it. But notice how he wants to make it look like it's a bad thing, even though supposedly God wants him to come to him. He's just asking for those criteria to meet. Is that arrogant? He's got his own criteria. Obviously, his criteria are so low. You could have somebody who's lower than him. Okay, but hang on a moment, Maverick. How is it that you've got that criteria? How are you so arrogant that you're accepting the Quran? Why are you so arrogant that you don't think you need the Hadith or the Sunnah? Isn't that arrogance? Should God just meet that? Because presumably these other things are the case. So you can play that card with anybody almost.
Hey, why is it too bad for me?
Because you're the one who's needy.
What do I need?
You need food. You need
I got food.
family. You need
I got family.
water.
I got water.
You got all of that from where? You didn't make that yourself, did you?
It didn't come from Allah, did it?
Oh, you tell me, where did it come from?
Oh, well, my food came from
What
farmers.
man made food? Farmers.
Yes.
And how did farmers get it?
And
How
we
did
go
farmers
all
get
the way back to evolution, that you think humans were created by clay, but we can go all the way back to the beginning, and I believe that matter has always existed. But that's not the point, because I don't want to get in the weeds of this. This is what we're talking about is very important. Why do I need Islam?
Why do you need
That's
Islam?
what
Yeah.
I like.
Because you need to make sense of your existence. You can't make sense
Ah,
of your existence.
Why do I
Right.
need sense of my existence?
He just said he doesn't. He's just contradicted himself. He doesn't even realize it.
Yeah, and what is it about your existence that Islam makes better sense of than something else? Oh,
Yeah,
well, it gives
remember,
you
this is what
purpose.
I asked 2 days ago on Discord.
Yeah.
It's my favorite
Give you
question.
purpose, it'll give you that. Well, how does, well,
Less
first you've got to show that
assumptions.
it's intrinsic purpose, but how does it make it better? You could only show it's better if we've got a set of criteria by which we can measure this. We go, okay,
Right.
if this, and this happens, then it's better. And it can only happen under Islam, and it's true, therefore it's better. I mean, you've got all your work ahead of you. Good luck demonstrating this claim.
Because that is what a human being does. Your whole you as a human being, what makes you different from an animal is the question why.
I am an
Things
animal.
have to make sense to you.
I'm an animal. I'm not.
You're an animal.
I'm an animal.
So you and a dog. There's no difference.
No, I never said
whatsoever.
that. There's
See how somebody can straw man? You and a dog is no difference. The category animal is a category that we're all fall under. Right, but now he's a bit defensive. So now we're going to have to straw man Pinecreek a little bit.
That's the difference I'm talking about. So why you being silly now?
We're a highly evolved. You're an
Let
animal.
me ask.
X, you're an animal.
Are you ever going to get peace if you don't get to the bottom of your questions?
I actually am a very peaceful person.
No. Do you have peace within yourself?
Yeah, I just said so. Yes.
Okay.
Why do I need Islam?
So
I
you're
have peace.
completely at. So wait. So you're completely at peace with the fact that you somehow just came into existence. You just labor away.
Yes,
Just
the answer
buy,
is yes.
work, eat shit, and then die. You just totally
Yes.
cool with that.
This is why you're a Muslim.
No, it ain't. It's a question. It's a question that
Yes.
every human being asks themselves. Is
I
it not?
just
Yes.
understand it.
I find hope, meaning, and purpose in every day with family and friends, with goals achieved, trying to improve myself. I
For
don't need.
what? You're gonna die.
And the other great thing is that he's being very humble. Is these videos will stay on the internet. People will watch this and go, this guy's amazing. He's given me inspiration. If you look at okay, Christopher Hitchens and these guys, had a much wider reach, but Pinecreek's doing a great job here, right? People will come across this and go, you know what? That's made a difference. Somewhere, at some point, at some time, somebody will watch this and go, do you know what? That just spoke to me in this moment and at that time. And if that's all that these videos did, I think Pinecreek would go, that's amazing. I've touched somebody's life that I never knew about. They've contacted me, etc. I had somebody recently contacted me that's going to remain private, and we had a conversation and so forth, that likes what we do and so forth. That's something that goes, okay, I'll keep doing this. It's a hobby. It's not something that stops and I need to do. But so there's other greater benefits here that he will be humble enough not to have to say, but that could well be the case, right? So if he can touch another human life, apart from his family, through thinking clearly and differently, I think he's done a great job, better than any supposed intrinsic, plan that people, getting from a book.
So are you? Yeah. Does that bother
Yeah,
you?
but no. You should no. But if I
I don't
knew that
wanna
was
live forever.
If I thought that death was the final,
Yeah.
and there was nothing else, then I wouldn't claim that there's purpose to this universe.
Well, that's
There's
where we're
that
different.
Whatever I can occupy myself.
That's why. That's
You're occupying yourself with a few ideas.
This is exactly where we're different. You feel you need eternal life of some sort to have meaning, hope, and purpose. I don't.
Do you think that's subjective, or do you think objectively there's a
It's
difference?
definitely subjective because for you, you need it. For me, I don't. You're a subject. I'm a subject.
Wait. What don't you need?
I do not need to live forever and ever and ever. In fact, I don't want that.
No, I'm not. I'm not speaking about living forever and ever. That's besides the point here. The point is, don't you need reasonable answers for why you exist in this universe, or do you?
Well, now
you
we're
just
back on that.
buy-
Yes, every human would like reasonable answers, but the difference between us and you is that we're okay saying we don't know certain things, and we're going to do the best we can with the life we have, with the family, the friends, the greater community, and see what difference we can make. And actually, we'll leave some sort of legacy. Now with the digital age, these videos will be up, Pinecreeks will be up, people who have contributed in whatever way, the people who are watching here that have left a comment, that have done something, we're all contributing in some way. And there'll be some sort of legacy. Maybe it won't be like a massive one like Hitchens, if you want to use that as an example, but we'll all leave some sort of legacy. There'll be something left behind. And for me, and hopefully for anybody who's watching it, that's meaningful. Maybe for you, that's not enough. And you want to be in the arms of a creator. And then we have to go into how good is that actually, this heaven of yours, while everybody else burns in hell. For me, that I could never find peace. I'd rather want annihilation, or I'd campaign day and night to have those people taken out of hell.
And we have the option of going and finding out instead of just rolling over and saying, well, God did it.
Yeah, there's so much to go and do and explore and to find out about the world that
Exactly.
we don't know and make this world a better place
Yep.
in a way. And we don't get there by reading old books, funnily enough. They just don't have the answers. And as we've seen today, when they put under the spotlight, and with Pinecreek not even being that, familiar with the Quran itself, he can do it with juxtaposing other ideas. And we find that, because the question is still on the table here, why does he need Islam? Right?
There's a question in the chat. Does a dog, think he needs a reason to live? Number one is not the point. And number two, well, maybe it does. We don't know. We don't know what a dog is thinking. So even if a dog were thinking this and would not be thinking this, there's no difference.
Yeah, and I heard from somebody who's done some study on that, and I think it was some sort of philosopher as well, that animals just move on from one thought to another. They don't have like there's speculation at least, but there's some reasons to think this, which I'd have to go back into, that they don't hold negative thoughts. So if they go to the door, for example, expecting their master and it's somebody else, they don't go, oh, I'm disappointed. And like there's any level of, depression, because they just go on, okay, well, I'm going to go and do something else, right? In some sense, they're a bit more free. But I don't think that a dog goes, oh, I need a reason to live. They just live. It's not like they have to think about that. Now, sometimes, you could view that as bad. You could view it as good. If you're somebody like Maverick that needs answers to everything, then the human, view, if you don't have the answers that he apparently has, would be worse. But in that view, that if you didn't have that, didn't want those, or didn't need those like a dog, then in some sense that would be better. So, but I think most of us are comfortable just saying we don't know. And the next big, thing that happens, we'll laud that discovery or whatever it is, and we'll move forward.
I believe that it's probably likely that some material has always existed. Our universe existed at the Big Bang through hundreds.
Is that faith?
No, there's definitely evidence that we had a Big Bang.
No. Okay, but we had a Big Bang and material always existed. The two contradict. You can't have both. So which is it?
Well, no, that's not the case. Of course, there are models that show that some form of matter has existed eternally. Again, there's no consensus on this matter, and that's why I think Pinecreek is not that interested in going down these routes. It's not that important, and the burden is on you to claim that you've got the answer.
No, that they don't contradict. Do you know what happened just before the Big Bang?
You tell me.
I don't. Do you? I don't know. Do you?
Well, if you don't, then you can't claim that material always existed.
No, I'm saying I have a belief that that's likely what's happened. To me, it's more reasonable to believe that the material has always existed than some new category of things that we can't even quantify, like the immaterial or the soul has always existed. No, to me, it's induction. No, it's
okay. No, it's not faith, because if we look around us, this is what we have. We're going on what we do know, not what we don't know. Faith comes in when you want to go to something that you don't know and can't demonstrate. It's reasonable to infer that if all of this existed, there's a reason to think that it's existed in some form eternally, if not exactly the form it's in now, rather than, as Pinecreek quite rightly points out, some other thing that you've got to speculate on its ontology, i.e. its state of being that is very different to anything we've ever experienced or might not even understand at all. Why would we do that? We're not saying that it is the case, but it's reasonable to infer. It's a inductive reason. In other words, based on background information, the probability for us is that that's likely the case.
It's induction. But you know what? It doesn't matter to me. If you want to put the label faith on it, fine. That's okay. I'm not defensive about it.
Why do you have? No, but okay. So why do you have faith in the fact that the universe, material has always existed? Like, based on what grounds?
Induction.
Okay, what part of induction has led you to believe that it's existed in infinity?
Same thing. Reason why when you see a black duck come around the bush, another black duck come around the bush, another black duck come around the bush 100 times over, and then I ask you, what's the color of the duck that's going to come around the bush? Now, it could be white, could be brown, but maybe it's black because it's been black all throughout history. When we've had questions of
that analogy is not going to work.
Okay, and so what would change our mind? I think maybe that's a question, right? If it were the case that all scientists agreed that the universe couldn't have a beginning, or material in some form, whatever you might call material, could not have existed prior to the Big Bang, then we could consider bringing in your hypothesis or something else. Until that stage, it's reasonable to think that something akin to, or at least something that we can understand, has existed in some form, right? But it's just one of the hypotheses. We would need something to disprove that to move us away from it, because it seems to be the most reasonable one than making up something else. I've got my special analogy anyway. I've got a special thing that I use on rare occasions. I've got my 10th dimension ontology that can explain this. In fact, in some senses, better than your God. I won't do it now, but at some point, if somebody reminds me on gin and tonic, I'll go through it very briefly. It'll take me 2 minutes to give you the basic ontology, and there'll be certain things in there that are better than your God. And that's an entire ontology that I can speculate about that doesn't require a mind.
And I just want to put a quick aside because we need to understand, if we call there's nothing called nothingness. We need to understand that nothing can be different things. So you need to decide whether it's a mathematical term that you're talking about, whether it's a philosophical or a cosmological nothing. So these are, or physical. So all these are different types of nothing, and they have different connotations. So you need to be very specific what kind of a nothing you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, doesn't work.
We're speaking about infinity here. We're speaking about infinity.
But I want to get back to.
No, we're speaking about infinity.
Okay, we're speaking about infinity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have no grounds to believe that matter could be infinite, do you?
Induction.
Why not?
What part of induction allows you to believe that it's infinite?
Because,
as a matter of fact, induction would lead you to believe that it's finite.
X, listen carefully. Listen carefully. I already answered this. To me, it's more reasonable, and you can disagree. Reasonable people can disagree. To me, it's more reasonable to believe that something material has always existed, as opposed to something immaterial or supernatural, some category of new things that we can't even describe without referring to the material, our properly basic beliefs that you and I share, feeling, seeing, hearing. To me, it just seems more reasonable that has always existed than postulating something other that we can't even put our hands around. Would you agree with that we can't scientifically test Allah?
Of course, I would agree with that.
Okay.
But then that assumes that you need to.
No.
Not only, how would you scientifically test that matter is infinite? How would you scientifically test that? And furthermore, you said we couldn't.
He didn't say he could test it. He said that it's an inference that he can draw, and he feels like it's the most reasonable. You haven't undermined that. You'd have to bring some argument, right? Maybe you want to try the contingency or something else, or a first cause argument, or whatever it is. But you aren't doing that at the moment, right? So all you're saying is, I find your view disagreeable, but you're not giving any good argument as to why you find it disagreeable. Exactly. He's given you his reason, induction, right? Now you could challenge that, but I don't see you doing it effectively at all at the moment.
And look how much of a skeptic he can suddenly be.
Exactly, when it's somebody else's worldview. The only reason he thinks God is more likely is because he already has a bias towards believing that God existed. If you didn't have that bias, you just looked at it, then likely you wouldn't. And not all, but the overwhelming majority of scientists are atheists, right? Why? Because they don't need to take that belief on. It doesn't explain anything any better. It only seems to explain it, quote unquote, better if you already believe it, because then it seems like it's a natural thing. But if you don't, it seems like it's superfluous and unnecessary unless you can demonstrate it's either more reasonable or it's necessary, which some arguments attempt to do. I don't think they work, but there you go.
Imagine without matter, but then we are not necessary. Neither is matter. What is necessary?
This conversation is so ridiculous to me because this has nothing to do with Islam.
It does.
No, it doesn't. And here's why. Could a God exist, or gods exist, and Islam be false? No?
Could a God exist
and Islam be false?
Could a God exist and Islam be false? No.
Okay, so immediately now I'm like, give me the argument that it's impossible for a God to exist and Islam to not exist. And all you have to posit is a deist type God. Right? That's a God that exists, that you have no awareness of, hasn't communicated in any way, that could exist, but you've got no way to access it. How would you establish that it's impossible? I mean, I just think that at this stage he's been, in a sense, and I mean it kind of nicely from Pinecreek's point of view, he's been battered such a lot that this is just an automatic response without thinking. He's just said no, and he hasn't thought about it, because now the argument is demonstrate that it's not possible. It's not that it's unlikely, but he's saying it's impossible.
No. So if there is a God, there's only one religion, that's Islam.
Yes.
Wow.
Ask me why.
Why?
Because you simply could not improve on the Quran.
So he's back
again. Oh my word. There we go back to that. Which I think Pinecreek himself has shown, that you can trivially easily improve upon the Quran. But let's say the Quran was in some sense as good as human beings can get. That still doesn't get you to it's impossible that another God exists. Okay, that argument does not get you to it's impossible another God exists.
That is such a horrible answer. That's such a horrible answer.
Why?
Oh my!
Go ahead, go for it.
Goodness.
Read the Quran and show me where it could be improved on.
You just did, you fool.
Well, something that's really important in life is, let's take in vitro fertilization. Does the Quran speak about that?
Nope.
No, the Quran is a book of guidance, not a book of medicine.
Yeah, see, this is the problem. Anything I
It's
can
a
bring up that could be an
concept.
improvement, you'll say, well, that's not what the book's for.
Yep. You want to say something there, Slops?
No, I just said it's a concept. It's not about science or anything or biology or anything. It's just a concept.
When I bring this up to Muslims, and I do quite regularly, because I think for me, the biggest reason I'm not a Muslim is the Quran itself. I look at this book and I think this is terrible, right? You can improve it in virtually any way you want. And when I bring it up to the Muslims and say, hey, how is it that we don't have these things in there? But oftentimes, amazingly, I wonder if they've heard this before somewhere, or it's the first thing that comes to their mind. They go, do you know what? The book would be too big. It would take too long. It would take too long for people to read and understand. And it's such an easy counter. I go, hang on a moment. If it were the size of a library, you could have specialists in every field. In fact, you could have it on a computer. You could, by today's standards, you could have all of this. And all I need to do is go there, put my fingerprint on it, ask a question, and it immediately gives me the answer. And I don't need all of it. And we can do that around the world, or have the obelisk or whatever. Or you have experts going out and they take just a small portion of it. Right? There's enough humans to cover what would be needed in almost every circumstance that the Quran could cover. But no, it would be too big. Well, hey, give us the summary version, but we know where we need to go to get all the specific nuanced answers that don't require some human interpretation where they argue with each other. I want the Alexander Library of Quran where I can go to, and it gives me all the answers. Then I go and test it. And my word, every single time I test it, it works out perfectly. And I go, well, actually, now I don't need to test anymore. I will have an inductive argument that whatever comes out of this Quran Alexander Library, I don't need to test. It just is the truth, because I've tested it so often and it's worked so reliably well, incredibly, in fact, that I don't need to do this. I just go there and I get that. And then I know what I can do, what I can't do, etc. I've still got free will, so it doesn't violate my free will, right? But that's the response I often get. The Quran would be too big. So easy to counter that.
That's true.
Okay. So there's nothing I could say that could convince you that the Quran could be better, is there?
Yeah, bring a better guidance. As a matter of fact, the Quran.
There we go. Bring a better guidance. Immediately the question is, what criteria would you accept for better guidance? Please lay it out for me here to see whether it's even possible. Because earlier you said you couldn't do it. Now you're saying, bring me a better guidance, right? Well, what is better? It's just some words. It's like you're just throwing the words out there, but you've got no criteria. You're not serious about this.
Actually says it.
Okay, what would be an example of a better guidance?
There you go.
What would be an example of a better guidance? Like, what specifically are you looking for?
A better explanation to life and a better way to live. Simple.
Simple, he says. He's given us absolutely nothing. See, Pinecreek and I are thinking along the same lines, right? He asked, what would make it better? A better way to live. Well, what constitutes a better way to live? What you've got to do with somebody like this is you've got to get them to specificity. They're in what's called the higher level, the abstract, right? You need to bring them down by asking the questions, which you may or may not do now, but it's something I would do, is get specific. What specifically do you mean by a better life? What is it? Give me an example of something, and let's see how could we make it better, and see whether it's in the Quran or not. Could we improve upon, right? Just make it specific.
Okay. So if someone can find a better way to live, does it have to be written down in a book? Like,
we're going to compare life to life, yeah.
Okay. Now, do you?
And it has to be delivered like the Quran, because not only is the Quran a great explanation for life, a better way to live, but delivered poetically, and in a way that can be, that people can remember. Like, you have 10-year-olds that have memorized the entire Quran.
Look, 10-year-olds can memorize poetry and so forth as well. How does that make it better? What we want is a expansive, nuanced explanation for these things, not some vague ambiguity that repeats itself, that has errors, etc., that some people can memorize. That doesn't make it effective. There's far more effective ways. But you see, this all goes back to what would make it better. Right? That's the criteria. Let's get clear on what it is. If we cannot agree on that, then your statement of, hey, bring something better is just like blah, 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 right? It has no content value. You're saying nothing.
Because it's designed that way.
Would have been better if Muhammad would have married a 16-year-old or an 8-year-old?
I have no idea what the ages of the wives of the Prophet.
You don't?
No, we're speaking about the Quran. We're not speaking about alleged
Okay,
writings.
I see.
She's later.
I see. Okay. Yeah, there's no reason for me to talk to you anymore, because anything I say, you'll just categorically say that's not what the Quran's for.
And you won't give a criteria for what will make it better. So you say, give us a better life, but you won't give us any specificity about how that could conceivably be the case. And if you haven't done this, you just haven't thought about this topic enough. So you go around debating and so forth, or talking to people, but you've never actually thought about this in any serious way. All you there, your mind is focused on, let me just have some answer that I can do for the Quran. But what I think, Pinecreek has done so well is elucidate that he can't think about these topics at a higher level, or indeed think about them in some more nuanced ways that he's not used to thinking about them. Give me a criteria. If you ever watch this, Maverick, give us a criteria for what would make it better, and then we see whether we agree that it's achievable, and let's see whether that can be the case. And it's so trivial if we do that with the Quran, right? So you're going to give criteria that makes it impossible. Go ahead.
And it can be so simple, because all it would have to say is, don't marry 6-year-olds, wait until you're 18. You're done.
Yeah. But he's gonna deny that, because it's apparently not in the Quran according to him. So he's going to sidestep that one. But we could bring up something in the Quran, right?
No, that would improve it. Just a statement like that. It would improve the Quran. It would give you better guidance.
Yeah, but you know what he's going to do, right? He's going to do exactly what he did with the other one where there's no slavery. Hey, but it mandates that anyway, so we don't need to do that. It's already in there in some vague, inference way. So making it clear would not be better. So what does better mean? Well, unclear?
Making it clear is better, isn't it? Isn't it saying
for every rational
specific?
Human being? Yeah, but for him, no. Because he can't, right? Because he's committed to go down this route of it's the best it is. Once you do that, you now have to, basically to everybody else, you need to seem irrational. Because you wouldn't do this in any other aspect of your life. Once you commit to it, it's very easy to show how you're becoming irrational. Hey, yes, if I go through this long story and show you by reading all these different things that it actually kind of says here that, hey, you shouldn't do that, instead of thou shalt not do X or Y. No, that's not better. My long-winded way that you have to infer is better. Okay.
And one thing we forgot completely, and this is what Kay Adnan is just saying, and that's so true, because we found that when we read the Quran, we often come across this, that it's not the contents, it's the rhyme, it's the poetry, it's the format that is more important than the contents. And this is a lot of times, this is something that we come across. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's hypnotic, I guess, but that doesn't make it true. It just means that it actually lowers the critical thinking capability. So if something is hypnotic, if you have rhythms, repetition, etc., that breaks down the critical thinking. If you look at cults, etc., they do this. They use sort of things where rituals where people do the same thing over and over and over, because then the brain gets trained to do X, Y, and Z, and it breaks away the critical thinking.
I could talk about
it's simple. The Quran is for guidance. That's just straightforward.
I could talk about the scientific improvements. Like if the Quran would have mentioned how to make a computer chip that would revolutionize the world so much sooner, but didn't. You would say, well, that's not what the Quran is for.
Well, the point is
atrazine. Atrazine is a chemical that kills certain plants. There's different chemicals that kills certain flies. These chemicals, Allah could have taught humans to do to save countless lives, but no. Basic biochemistry, no.
Okay, the point is the Quran is about warning and glad tidings, and the purpose is so that on Judgment Day,
warning of what?
You're going to be held accountable for it. That's it.
So what?
So it doesn't. Sorry.
So what? Why is
so what?
You said Judgment Day accountability. Why is that important?
It's important because, like, one, you've been given a life, you've been sustained. So your existence has to be worth it. You've either been someone who brings to the world some good, or someone who simply just takes, and you're going to be judged for it. At the end
Why
of the
is
day,
Judgment
Day?
Should I be scared of judgment?
The people who are quote unquote good, they live together, and the people who are bad, they live together. That's the point.
That doesn't sound. Is that supposed to be bad or good or what? So
well,
what?
Of course. Well, of course. I mean, when we talk about evil, evil is only done by evil people. If there is no...
Well, that's not true. Good people have sometimes done evil. And as Hitchens and others said, right, to get a good person to do evil, that takes religion, right? I mean, I know that's a bit of a quip, and some people will push back at that. But sometimes good people will do evil things. That's just part of what we're doing. But I think the whole, this is kind of a bit of a waffle here. There's nothing substantial that he's actually saying in response to, why is judgment a bad thing? Why should we care about this, right? Oh, because your soul X, Y, and Z, right? So he's appealing to well-being. But the other thing that maybe Pinecreek's not aware of, and if he ever watches this, is to ask a Muslim, but hang on a moment, do people, because different Muslims have different ideas, do people who have never come across Islam, are they still have an opportunity to be judged on their deeds separately, and they could go to heaven? And some Muslims will say yes. The Quran seems to point to no. So, if you're a disbeliever, you go to hell. But some Muslims might say no. And if that is the case, and again, I don't know what Maverick's view is, then it's probably better that you never speak to those people, because if you do such a bad job as Maverick's done here, you're likely to get somebody to go, no, I don't believe Islam, because of Maverick's performance, in which case, when they had the opportunity to join Islam and didn't, it would have been better that they never heard him, and they would have been judged on their deeds if they're a good person. So it depends on which sort of person you're talking about. So it's not always the case, it seems to me, that Islam needs to go out there, and especially if he's written it on your heart, right? So all of these problems, they have to try and overcome.
No evil people. There is no evil.
So where do you think I go?
You take your pick. You go to the place.
I get to choose?
You go to the. Well, let me tell you where you go. You go to the place where the ungrateful people go. You don't feel like you have anything to be grateful for, do you?
No, I do. I just don't believe it's grateful to a deity.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, but you're grateful to?
My wife, my family. Sometimes people give me stuff. I'm grateful for it. But I'm grateful for the super chats.
No.
But anyhow,
what about your life? What about your life?
I've been trying to pull a certain word out of you, and you're so hesitant to say it. What am I grateful for my life? My education?
Are you grateful for your life?
Am I great? Yes. But
to who?
Well, I'm grateful to the way my parents raised me. There's a lot of good things they did.
But
I've been trying to pull a certain word out of your mouth, and you refuse to say it.
Go on, tell me.
The word hell.
What about it?
Do you believe hell exists?
Absolutely.
Who goes there?
Those that have caused hell.
What?
And who are they?
The people who have caused evil in the world. The people who have hurt people.
Have you caused evil?
Sorry?
Have you caused evil?
Have I?
Yeah. Have you caused
evil?
Caused evil? So you're going to hell?
Caused evil.
You're going to hell?
No, but I've repented for it.
So
I've repented for it, and I've changed my ways to the best of my ability.
You've repented of all your evils, or just some?
Yeah, absolutely. All of it. Those that I remember.
What about the ones you don't remember? Will you go to hell for the ones you didn't repent for that you didn't remember?
No, because
see, I love when these questions are asked and there's this long pause. The brain is engaging. What do I say to this? Right? That to me that's probably the things that are most noticeable and notable for me is the long pauses, because now they have to think. Something that they don't do as much on a daily basis about what they believe.
And the funny thing is, a lot of people don't even understand this. They feel uncomfortable themselves if the other guy has to think, and other people tend to then have this inclination to say something, and I always say, no, shut up, leave it, wait, because this is what you're actually looking for. But this seems to be very uncomfortable for other people too. I cherish it. I think it's brilliant, but a lot of people can't handle it.
Yeah, well, you and I have been doing a little while longer than other people, but it's a lesson. If you're listening to this and you're in conversations and there's a pause because you've asked the question and you think it's a good question, let the pause hang there. The longer you do it, as long as and other people are watching should allow that pause to hang there. This gap needs to grow, right? While the person thinks, give them the time to think. That's presumably what you want them to do, unless you want them to talk to you off a script. You want them to consider it. If you think they're mistaken and you've asked something and there's a silence there, they're thinking, hopefully, especially if you can see them and so forth like this, allow them, give them if you wanted to change their minds, which is what I want to do, and I think Pinecreek does as well, or maybe he doesn't, I don't know, but I certainly would like people to think more critically, and if they do, I think they would come to the conclusion that religion is not true. So that is my intent. I'm open about that, and I want them to think. I want to give them the gift of thinking about a question they maybe have never heard before, or maybe never phrased in that way, or whatever the case is, and I want them to think. That for me is one of the, if I get nothing else out of it, because I don't expect anybody, and I don't think most of us do, that somebody's going to change their mind in the moment. But if they can stop and have this moments like this, for me, I've done something. I've asked them something. I've got them to do something they would otherwise not have done. And that's just one small step. Maybe they come up with a great answer, and that's fine. But at least it's something that they had to stop for. And to me, that's important.
God knows my intentions.
Oh, so it doesn't matter the results; it's the intentions. Is that right?
That is. Yes, it's intentions that matters, and rightfully so. Don't you think?
Well, I don't know. You could kill 100 innocent children, and your intentions could have been good, but maybe in Allah's eyes, it's bad.
Well, if my intentions was good, then I'm not going to be judged for anything other than my
Okay,
intentions.
but the point
My
is,
intentions that matters.
if I don't repent of my sins, I go to hell. Yes.
If you don't repent from your sins,
Yeah.
well, you actually need to do something before that. You need to be grateful first.
Okay, so if I don't be grateful to Allah, can I be grateful to Jesus?
Can we say grateful to God? Because when we say Allah, it's almost Arabizing the.
Well, no, I have
a
to.
universal religion. Here.
I have a lot of
Sorry?
Christian. I have to because I have a lot of Christian viewers. Just call Allah God. There's no way Allah is the same as Jesus. We're agreed.
I beg your
Right?
pardon? No, but we're not speaking about Jesus. We're speaking about God.
I know, but the reason why I say Allah instead of God is because for some people listening right now, when they hear word God, they think Jesus, and so I'm just being very specific. Dead serious. You know this is true.
All right, go ahead. All right, I'm gonna let that go.
But anyhow, we should wrap this up because we've been talking too long.
Very interesting.
If I don't repent, I go to hell, and I have to be grateful first. And in order not to go to hell, I have to be grateful and repent to Allah. Yes, and then
Yes.
I get to be in the group with you after we die and live forever.
Just do good to the best of your ability.
Okay.
Let me ask you something. Besides the fact that you don't believe in God, do you find that problematic? To be grateful, to repent from transgressions, and to do good to the best of your ability.
No.
Besides the fact that you don't believe in God, do you find that problematic?
No. When I was a Christian for many years, I used to think, oh, these people make so many mistakes. It's because, no, sorry, these people sin so much, and it's because they don't have Jesus and they don't know the true God. And if they knew Jesus and the true God, they wouldn't sin like this. And then as I got older, I realized that Christian or not, people did the same things, made the same mistakes, and realized people make mistakes. They're not transgressing against an all-powerful deity. Some because of either lack of education or lack of intelligence or just whatever, will go down the wrong path, the way they were raised, and none of this could have anything to do with the deity. And I think that's the same with Islam. It's you think you need this deity out there to be grateful to repent to, in order to get certain things like eternal life or this good grouping, as you say, at the end of death. You think you need this deity to explain first cause
really
and why
not
we're
about eternal
here.
life.
Well, whatever. But I'm telling you, you don't need it. You do not need it to explain where we're coming from, why we're here, not why we're here, but how we're here. Because I think any question that you could ask for me that I would say I don't know with, like first cause questions like you did earlier, I could say, well, how did Allah make the universe? What was the mechanism? Basically, you're left with saying he spoke it into existence. He just did it because he's all.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? So they think they've got the explanation, but the explanation is simply that God did it. It doesn't explain anything. And if he's interacted in this world, then in principle, I think science can be brought to bear. I'm somebody who does think that, right? So if it violates the laws of physics or whatever the case is, we could come to the conclusion that it violated the laws of physics. And if there's some way we could move it towards a particular God, then I think there would be evidence in favor. Same, Sean Carroll thinks the same. If people all rose up at the time of Jesus, he resurrected, and so did all these other people, that would move me in that direction. Suddenly all of these things are happening that are completely against everything we understand, and that would move me in that direction, right? So, but just to say that he did it, but you have no clue how, and especially for people like us who have discerning minds, we want to know how. If you did it, explain to us how it's done. Whether we can understand it, me personally or Pinecreek can understand it, that's fine. But there might well be a human that could. And if you can't explain it in a way that your creation can understand, wow, whose fault is that?
Powerful. You're just substituting one mystery into another. That's all you're doing.
Okay, but let me put this to you though. When you say, what did he use? What mechanism? Are you not applying induction there? And you're applying that induction based on what we do.
Yes, I'm applying. When people say we need an explanation, that's usually what they mean. Explain how this happened, you atheist. Where did we come from? Explain where. And a lot of theists, maybe you haven't done it, but you will want exactly how did it work. But when it comes to, if I was to ask the same question back to you, you just say, oh, God did it. Allah did it. We're done.
But there's a reason, Pinecreek, though. Let's be fair. If you say, how did God do it and what mechanism did he use? You're basically comparing God to us. Because in order for us to do something, there are certain mechanisms that we use.
Go ahead, Stops.
No, I'm just objecting. No, that's not true. It's not true.
Yeah, whatever the mechanism is, presumably it's explicable, i.e., it can be explained, even if we don't understand it. It can be explained, and at some point, maybe we'll come to understand it. But if the explanation's there, then at least we can say, okay, here's an explanation. Either we can verify it or we can't, or it's beyond us at the moment, but there's an explanation. That would at least go some way to filling in this gap. And there is a gap there. And even though you say God did it, that doesn't explain how. And some of us would like to know how that's possible, and presumably he has the power to do it.
There are substances that we use in order for us to create something of it. That's our method. You're applying what we do to God Almighty.
Yeah.
So who's being unreasonable here?
I think we're done.
The simple thing is it explicable? Is it explicable by God to explain this or not? If you say it's inexplicable, that it's so complicated that it can't be explained, then I'm going to sit back and go, hang on a moment, isn't this guy able to do things sort of by magic? But you can still explain magic, even if the beings don't yet understand it, unless you're saying it's just too hard for any human being ever to understand it. Well, then that's a limitation on us, right? Okay, if you want to limit us that way, and yet you've made us this way to ask these questions, and you say, well, it's too difficult. It's like a child going, well, how do you do that, Dad? Or whatever the case is. Oh, it's too difficult for you to understand. Is that going to be sufficient? And we do this from when we're very young until some of us until we die. And here's your God who wants to bring us to him. This is another mechanism, right? Explain how it's done. That would go some way to doing it. No book does that. And if one book did that and we could explain it in some way like, Einstein or string theory or whatever it is, that would move people in that direction if he wants us to move in that direction. But hey, it's not a book of science, right? It's a book of signs. Even though signs are so ambiguous. The stop sign looks like a yield sign. It looks like a go sign sometimes if you look from a particular angle, if you have a different interpretation. Not particularly good signs either.
Well, think about it.
No,
who's being unreasonable?
The problem is we're so separated in our worldviews. Like for you, you have this fear in you.
I don't.
You don't fear Allah?
I mean, it's the first time we've spoken.
No, I'm saying you have fear in you of Allah. I can tell.
Not at all.
You don't fear Allah?
No, I appreciate him. I respect him.
Okay.
I mean, the Quran says to fear Allah. Everybody ought to fear him.
It says it dozens of times. It's like 80 times that it says it.
Well, obviously, he's forgotten that, right? Because I think he's got, you know what I think stops? I think he's got this view of Islam that's like a fairyland, right? That isn't connected directly with the Quran. Says, and whenever something comes across that he's uncomfortable with, let me find a way to have another interpretation, even if it's from a random scholar that's completely out of left field, that might be a Sufi or whatever the case is. So one of these people who have a entirely different subjective interpretation that wants, that sounds plausible to them, because he has this fairy tale version of Islam in his mind.
Substitute fear with a deeper emotion, love. You have this love for Allah. Okay, is that fair?
Really and truly? Okay.
I
do have this love for Allah.
Okay.
And I do, but the love is something that developed. So
fine. I don't care how it happened. But this is why the conversation should probably stop, because we're separated. You have inside you this, what are you doing? You need to respect and humble yourself before the creator of the universe. I can't believe you're saying this. How come you're not grateful? It's like you're coming from this point of view that is just so bizarre to me, that there's just no way to go from here. And your answers of why you believe Islam is true are just pathetic to me. And when I ask you to demonstrate something right now, you can't do it. And so there's nothing left to talk about, really.
Okay, can I just say one thing though?
Okay.
He doesn't want to let it go. We're almost at the end. There may be another 2 minutes or something like that. But he doesn't want to let it go because I think it's clear that he hasn't been able to explain anything or give any good reasons for it, etc. This has been a one-way sort of conversation in the sense of him being able to give anything substantive. But he doesn't want to let it go now. There's got to be one last shot here to try and get something in before it finishes.
You can have the last word.
This little caricature. Okay. This little caricature that you made. No, it's got nothing to do with being motivated by fear or love or any of that. As a matter of fact, it's motivated by intelligence.
Yeah.
I simply do not understand that I exist. I have sustenance. This whole universe. As a matter of fact, even the cosmologists will say that the cosmos has been finely tuned for life.
Yeah.
There is way too much that you
haven't even begun.
suggest to me is simply coincidence. So it's not that I'm driven by. So it's not that
Essentially, it's a huge, big argument from personal incredulity. I don't know how this could have happened, but I have a solution that tells me how. It doesn't really tell me how in any meaningful sense. It just says, I did it because I'm powerful enough to do it, but I can't imagine how this could have come about. I would invite you, Maverick, just to open your awareness to find out more. And you will find some explanations to some of these things. Maybe it'll never be sufficient for you, but an argument from personal incredulity is never good to anybody who's listening.
I'm driven by any kinds of emotions. I'm driven by intelligence. In fact, I would argue that you are driven by emotions, because the whole night you've sprouted nothing else but emotions.
Yeah.
So this entire time when you were being asked questions, etc., to show justification, everything like that Pinecreek asked, by your lights, this was all emotions. This is when somebody says, when
this. Rob, he needed this. This was his last word. He had to come up with something like this. This was a necessity for him to bring this out there, even though it was totally unjustified. This is an emotional necessity for him to come there out on top. This is now him running away, screaming, "You lost."
Yeah, it's a good point, right? It's like a defense mechanism that's kicked in now to show that, hey, this was all emotional on your side, when in fact it was entirely logical and rational. And he just asked those questions that a discerning person would ask. And the only response is, well, you've been kind of emotional about this. Yeah, you're right.
Okay. How do you walk around, eat every day, and not wonder why that exists? Doesn't make any sense.
God, stop.
I said I would give you the last word, and I thought that was it. So I'll bid you adieu.
That little bit was it.
Yeah. Take
Please.
care.
All righty, there we go. Stops, some words from you, sir.
I think there's no way to talk to somebody like this at this or on this level. What would have to happen, I think, is just ask one question, that is, give me the best argument that you think warrants why you are a Muslim, and then take only that argument. Do not get sidetracked. Take only this and ask questions. What is it? Why do you do da-da-da? Just ask questions about this one topic. If he now comes up with this, with fine-tuning, okay, what is fine-tuning? What about it? What would you say if we found this way? And so on and so forth. That's, I think, the only way to do it. Do not make assumptions. Do not make any offerings. Don't say this is what the Quran says. Just ask questions, but keep it on one topic only. I think this is the only way forward with a person like this, in my eyes.
Yeah, I just think it was a great textbook example of somebody being able to have a conversation with somebody, not knowing their particular book, asking them some very pointed questions, juxtaposing it with something that you do know, and asking them what they think of this. And a lot of that was, what do you think of this? And like I say, the golden moments for me were the pauses where Maverick had to think, because he's so used to just coming up with some sort of response that's pre-programmed that he's heard before. And look, we all do that to some degree. But those moments of thought, I think, are golden. And I think that's one of Pinecreek's great strengths, is to ask questions that people aren't expecting, to get them to think. And maybe it'll have an effect on them, maybe it won't, but hopefully it'll have an effect on other people. And I think, if anything, that would be, one of the things that Pinecreek will have as a legacy as long as YouTube lasts. And I think it was just a great example of how to have a conversation in a very different way than Stops and I do. As you say, because we know the Quran and we'll go down that route into the nuance, this is just another way to do it. So again, thank you to everybody who's viewed. Thank you so much to Stops. Thanks to Pinecreek, and obviously even to Maverick for that conversation, because it's given us a window into how to do things in a different way when you don't have the background knowledge on a particular book, but you do have a sense of it. But he asked the big questions. Why should I have Islam? And so forth, right? Those are the questions that anybody who might be considering it would ask. And if anybody else who's considering Islam, go and watch this video. You don't have to watch our review necessarily, or you can, but then go and ask the same questions that Pinecreek asked of somebody, the Muslim that you're speaking to, if you're going to be converting, and see what answer they've got. Did they do any better than Maverick? And if you think Maverick did good, then please, by all means, send us comments, or come onto the show, the Gin and Tonic Show, which is our other show that we run, and come and tell us what are the good things that you think Maverick said out of that entire, whatever it was, about an hour, give or take, that you think is good, and we'll have a conversation. Because I didn't find anything of value there. And I'm not being somebody who wants to go, okay, everything was terrible, but I didn't hear anything substantive that if I was considering Islam even, I'd be moved by, especially if I was going to read the Quran. If I was just going to take his word, well, then he's going to paint it like, it's wonderful. But I think, you've got to be very skeptical of. And so it's his interpretation, but read the Quran yourself, ask questions like Pinecreek did. And I think that's a great way to go.
Thank you, people in the chat. Thank you for spending time with us.
Indeed. Thank you to all the viewers. Thank you if you've come this far and you've watched it as a recording. And I'm sure we'll be back again with another review when we have the time and we find a video that's of interest. Until next time, take care. All the best.
Cheers. Bye-bye.